Hello, and welcome back to yet another video. This is the 27th episode in a Naruto Uzumaki story in which a few little changes might have a significant impact. Knowledge provided early in Naruto's career converted him from a hopeless loser to a powerful and skilled shinobi. Historical differences that have long ago passed have resulted in a totally different consequence than we imagined. After you've finished watching, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. To begin, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Let's get the party started. Kumagakure no Sato, the village hidden in the clouds, was located in a tall mountain range that, quite literally, was located above the clouds, hence the name. The rugged terrain made traversing the mountains difficult, even for experienced shinobi. That was part of the reason Kumo had never fallen victim to enemy attacks. Only ninja with in-depth knowledge of these mountains could launch a successful invasion. Of course, there was no army with that kind of knowledge who could storm this stronghold, which meant the chances of that happening were zero. Or so everyone assumed. Orochimaru, disguised as a middle-aged man with dark skin and blonde hair, walked up the steep path that led to Kumo's main gate. There were three others behind him. Their long, gray tops wrinkled as they moved. It was gathered at the waist, making it appear more like a sash than a shirt. They wore a white, one-strapped flak jacket over this, and their legs were adorned with shin guards that clicked against their shins as they moved. None of them spoke as they walked up to the stall where a pair of ninja were standing guard. The stall, built into the rock face of a mountain, resembled a formidable outpost. Metal shutters around the open hole indicated that it could be used as a barricade of sorts. Just what Orochimaru would have expected from a hidden village like this. Returning from a mission? One of the guards asked as he held out a clipboard. "Sign here please." Of course. Orochimaru smiled as he grabbed the clipboard and pen offered to him, signed it with a made-up name that sounded like it had come from Kumo, and handed it back. Neither guard appeared to realize that his eyes, black with a red star pattern inside, were spinning. The guard looked at the name, nodded, and set the clipboard aside. "Welcome back to Kumo. Good work." "Thank you." The group of four traveled deeper into Kumo, leaving the outpost behind. Orochimaru gazed at the many mountains towering over them. A lot of the mountains had structures built into them. Many of them were rounded. There were also numerous small buildings with yellow walls and blue roofs located along the base of each mountain. He was sure that these were just entrances. The true city probably lay in the mountains themselves. As they walked along, the trio behind him began to speak. "That was a lot easier than I expected. For a country that prides itself on their military, they have an appalling security. Humph. I can't believe this country has survived for as long as it has." Now, Orochimaru chided the trio. "Do not speak like that. In this case, it is not their fault for being unable to recognize us as a threat. Like Konoha, Kumo had a unique barrier that detected hostile chakra signatures. However, it was neither as sophisticated nor as powerful as the one in Konoha. Because Kumo relied almost solely on their military strength, they did not have a very strong Fuinjutsu style. Even their method of sealing Baijuu was unstable. Orochimaru was actually surprised their Jinchuriki for the Eight Tails was considered a perfect host. "What are we going to do now?" asked one of the two males behind him. "Now?" Orochimaru chuckled. "Why, we're going to see the Raikage, of course." The Raikage's office was located at the highest point in the village. It was not on a mountain, but neatly situated between three mountains, held above the ground by three large bridges that extended from the mountains to the spherical bottom. The office was oddly shaped. It looked like a sphere with a donut sitting on top of it, followed by an inverted cone on top of that. The cone was actually a wall. Sprouting from behind the wall was a large amount of foliage, from which two stone towers with cables sticking out of them jutted in turn. To reach the office, they had to go through a series of checkpoints. Each checkpoint was manned by a pair of Jonin-level ninja. Unlike in Konoha, where just anyone was able to pop into the Hokage's office, authorization to the Raikage's office was only granted to those who had been given special permission. Normally, they would have never been able to reach the Raikage's office. Normally. "I'll need to see your papers," one of the guards said as Orochimaru and his three ninja walked up to the first checkpoint. "Very well." Orochimaru smiled as the red star within his black eyes began to spin. He held out a sheet of blank papers to the two guards. "Here you are." The guards looked them over and, not able to find anything wrong with the papers, gave them back to Orochimaru. "You're free to proceed. You have my thanks." Withholding a chuckle, Orochimaru proceeded through each checkpoint with his entourage, bypassing every level of security with blank papers that everyone who gazed at them thought were security clearance papers. Of course, They could have used a chakra examination to see if the papers were false. In fact, the blank papers should have been a dead giveaway that these were nothing more than, well, blank papers. However, not a single ninja who saw them even thought about that. The idea that they might be fake didn't even occur to them. "Those eyes of yours sure are something," Ishidate said. "It's almost frightening how easy it makes deceiving people." Orochimaru's smile widened. "Why do you think these eyes are so coveted?" "The ability to see chakra as it's manipulated, the ability to analyze and copy every attack, the power to cast genjutsu that not even a cage can see through easily. There is a reason I wanted these eyes for myself." They walked along one of the three large, red bridges that extended from one of the mountains to the Raikage's office. The crisp and chilly air was enough to freeze the lungs of those who weren't hardy enough. Being so high up meant the air here was incredibly thin, which made breathing difficult for those who weren't trained to fight in higher climates. It was a natural defensive measure. He stopped walking and turned his head, seemingly looking at the sky. However, one of his eyes shifted toward Ishidate, still disguised, and he grinned. "Would you like to try and claim these eyes for yourself, I wonder?" "No, thanks," Ishidate said. "I'm smart enough to know that I don't stand a chance against you." The female, Karen Bana, leaned into the other male ninja with them as she cupped a hand to her mouth. "Am I the only one frightened by this man?" "You are not," Kongo said, his burly frame hidden behind a transformation jutsu of his own. "Glad to know it's not just me." Chuckling to himself, Orochimaru walked into the Raikage's office. Of course, they only entered the lobby first. As they strolled through the open space, across the blue floor, a woman appeared from within a room, her dark skin and white hair marking her as a Kumo native. She paused upon seeing them. "Do you have business with Raikage-sama?" she asked with a frown. Orochimaru smiled as his star within his pupils spun again. "I do. I have some urgent business that I must speak with him about. If you'd be so kind as to take me to him, I would appreciate." "Of course." The woman's eyes glazed over. "Right this way." The woman turned around and strode up a set of stairs, leading them to a simple door. She knocked once before entering. Orochimaru and his entourage followed suit. Beyond the door lay an open room with very little decoration. The blue floor contrasted with the yellow walls. Exercise equipment sat off to one side, a set of free weights and a punching bag. This office didn't have a desk. It had a couch with a small coffee table in front of it. Behind the couch was a curved series of windows fitted around rectangular metal frames, giving those who arrived a clear view of Kumogakure mountain range. A man sat on the couch, large and imposing, his dark skin bulging with muscles. He wore no shirt, allowing rippling abdominals and a thick chest to be on full display. The dark skin contrasted with his dark hair. Upon seeing them, the man lifted his left arm, a thick metal bracer attached to it, and placed on his knee. Dark eyes stared at them from beneath thick eyebrows. "Mabui," the Raikage said in a gruff voice. "Who are these people?" The woman, Mabui, tilted her head. "You do not know them? They said they had something urgent to talk to you about." From the stiffening of the Raikage's muscles, it was clear to Orochimaru that the man was already on guard. Perhaps he already suspected something was off. Well, no matter. This would be over quickly. "Greetings, Raikage," Orochimaru said as he stepped forward. Still playing his role, he knelt before Kumo's most powerful ninja. "I have come to speak with you about an important matter." Before Orochimaru could activate his eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, the Raikage suddenly vanished from his couch. Orochimaru only received a second's warning before the powerfully built man slammed into the place where he was standing. However, much like a certain shinobi who was now dead, Orochimaru burst into a flock of crows. The crows flew around the room before reassembling themselves into his body several meters in front of the Raikage. Those eyes. The Raikage narrowed his eyes as he stared at Orochimaru's Sharingan. "A Uchiha? No, you just have the eyes of one." Scowling, the man readied himself for a fight as Ishidate, Kongo, and Karen Bana surrounded him. "Who are you?" "You don't need to know that," Orochimaru said with a smile as Mabui walked behind the Raikage and pulled out a sheathed blade. After all, puppets have no need to know who is pulling their strings. Thanks to a genjutsu he had cast during the 1 second where the Raikage had stared into his eyes, the large man was a second too slow to respond properly when Mabui jabbed her lightning-coated blade into his back. The man grunted as lightning coursed through him. He probably could have negated it, but thanks to another genjutsu, the thought never occurred to him. "Now." Orochimaru walked up to the Raikage as the three he'd brought with him held the Raikage down. With his muscles spasming from the electric shock, the man, normally strong enough that he could have torn himself free in seconds, was helpless. Mabui, under the influence of his Sharingan, grabbed her Raikage by the hair and forced him to look at Orochimaru. "Time for you to say goodnight. Tsukuyomi." Zox. Despite the beautiful day, Naruto could not help but feel troubled. 2 weeks had passed since the mission to rescue Gaara. His time had been spent mostly training and going on easy missions to earn money. Kyuubi, or rather Akane, still refused to speak with him. That wasn't the problem. He'd been dealing with that for a long time now. The issue he'd run into was similar, but at the same time, different. "You do know that it's rude to ignore a girl when you take her out on a date, don't you?" asked Yugito, snapping Naruto out of his trance. He sent her an apologetic smile. "You're right. I'm sorry for spacing out like that. It seems like you have something serious on your mind." Yugito tucked a strand of hair that had fallen over her face behind her ear. "Would you like to tell me about it? Maybe having someone else's perspective could help you solve whatever problem you're having." The two of us were sitting on a blanket spread across a grassy field, training field 7, the same training field where Naruto had passed the first test alongside Sasuke and Sakura. A basket sat on the blanket with them. It was open to reveal an assortment of foods like onigiri, karage, and pickled vegetables. Yugito had just returned from a mission 2 days ago. Naruto had caught her leaving the mission's office and asked if she would like to have lunch with him and catch up, leading to their current situation. Naruto would have normally loved spending time with Yugito like this, but with his thoughts so preoccupied, he'd been unable to properly enjoy basking in the beautiful Jinchuriki's presence. Another perspective might help, Naruto admitted with a reluctant sigh. "Tenten hasn't been talking to me since our mission to rescue Gaara. She normally spends at least 2 days manning her father's store, but I've gone there once every day for the past week and discovered that she hasn't been around. At first, I thought she was just going on missions, but then I found Rock Lee training at one of the training grounds and tried to ask him if he'd seen Tenten. The response he'd given me was a lot colder than I've ever seen him give another person. Neji had also been the same way." It confused Naruto a great deal since neither of them had been cold to him before. Well, Neji had back when he still had that stick up his ass, but Naruto was sure he'd properly pulled the stick out. They had been his friends and trusted comrades for a long time now. The three of them had even gone on a number of missions together. He couldn't fathom why they were acting like this now. Yugito drew her legs up to her chest, hugging them as she rested her chin on her knees. The thoughtful look on her face made Naruto pay attention. "This is just a hunch, but do you think it might have something to do with how you slept with Temari?" asked Yugito, staring into his eyes with a penetrating gaze. "I don't see how me sleeping with." "Oh." Naruto felt like he'd been slapped in the face. "She saw me and Temari, didn't she?" "Yes." Yugito nodded with a wry smile. "She did." Naruto suddenly realized what kind of predicament he was in. Snagging a pickle with his chopsticks, he popped the food into his mouth and thought. Tenten had seen him and Temari having sex, which was undoubtedly the reason she was avoiding him and the reason for the cold glares Neji and Rock Lee gave him. That made sense. It wasn't like his relationship with Temari was a secret. Everyone in Suna knew about it, and he certainly never tried hiding it from Tenten. However, it was also true that he'd just returned from his 2-year training trip with Jiraiya, and his relationship with Temari had only progressed after he and his perverse sensei had left Konoha. Of course she wouldn't know about it. Of course she would feel angry, betrayed, and hurt when she found out the way she did. I should have said something. Naruto hadn't said anything because, well, the idea simply hadn't crossed his mind. He hadn't given this matter any thought. That was his mistake. "What do you think?" asked Naruto. "About me and Temari, I mean? Well, I can't say I was too pleased when I found out." Admitting this, Yugito unwrapped her arms from around her legs, stretched them out, and placed her hands behind her as she leaned back. "At the same time, I'm a bit more open-minded when it comes to sex. Tenten is a very pure girl in this regard. I doubt she's ever had to go on a mission to seduce an assassination target, and she's not really the type who uses sex as stress relief. I'm not like that either, you know," Naruto said, his tone drier than Suna's desert. Yugito flashed him a grin. "I know, but because of your unique circumstances, you don't wish to have a proper relationship with someone else. If by proper relationship, you mean one that ends in marriage and children, then no, I don't." Naruto sighed as he let his shoulders slump. It felt like a weight had suddenly been placed on it. "Outside of the fact that I am completely sterile, even if I were inclined to take a wife, she would just die and leave me alone." He paused, and then continued, his voice much softer. "At the same time, I do want to have something. Even if it's not marriage, even if it doesn't end in having a big family, I want to form strong bonds with people." You mean you want to form strong bonds with women? Yugito added with a sly grin. I thought that would be a given. He rubbed his face as though to wipe away the exhaustion suddenly seeping into his bones. But yeah, I guess. I should find Tenten and do my best to explain myself, huh? I recommend waiting a bit. Yugito shook her head. Tenten's feelings are still very muddled. I'm sure the hurt and confusion will only get worse if you try to push her. But wouldn't it be better to explain myself quickly? I've heard that leaving problems like this can cause them to fester over time. Yes, but trying to confront her too quickly could result in it festering, as you call it, to accelerate and become even worse, Yugito shot back. I recommend waiting for at least another week or two. Give her some time to calm down and then confront her. If he was being honest, Naruto would have preferred confronting Tenten right now. He was a man of action. He hated just sitting on his laurels while there was a problem in front of him. At the same time, he trusted Yugito in these matters. She was not only someone he cherished as a person. She was also a woman like Tenten, and so her advice was invaluable. I'll follow your advice then, Naruto said, nodding. Good. Yugito smiled as she grabbed an onigiri and tossed it up and down. And now that I've helped you with your problem, no more sad faces, no more staring off into space. Unlike Tenten, I do not care who you have slept with. Right now you are mine and mine alone. I can't have you thinking about other girls when we're on a date. You are right. Nodding with her, Naruto could do nothing but agree. I'm all yours. All mine, you say? Yugito grinned. In that case. Swifter than Naruto thought possible, the Nibi's Jinchuriki crawled over to him and laid her head on his lap. When he looked down, it was to find a cat-like grin on her face. In payment of my services, you are going to feed me. Such a demanding Nico, Naruto mumbled, but, with a grin splitting his lips, he reached out toward the bento box with his chopsticks and began feeding Yugito. The warm air of Konoha blanketed them like a second skin. Since the Land of Fire was such a mild and temperate place, the climate in Konoha never really changed with the seasons. Even during winter, the weather remained pleasantly warm, perfect some would say. That was actually why this country had earned the name Land of Fire. Well, that and the brilliant sunsets that made it seem like the forests were catching fire. 1 week had passed since Naruto's talk with Yugito. Just as the beautiful Jinchuriki had suggested, Naruto had not tried to see Tenten at all. He stayed away from her father's store, didn't actively look for her, and spent a good deal of the time he would have spent looking for her training. Yugito was gone. She left a few days after their date. The woman had shown up at his apartment one evening and informed him that she had been recalled to Kumo. There was no explanation as to why this was, but orders were orders, and it wasn't all that strange for her to return and make periodic reports, though this was the first time she'd been recalled. He'd treated her to dinner that night. She left early the next morning. The early morning air remained warm despite the sun only just beginning to rise. Naruto stood inside the Hokage's office to receive a mission. He was early. His team hadn't arrived yet, which meant it was currently just him, Tsunade, and Shizune. Where are they? Naruto complained with his arms crossed. He frowned and tapped his left foot against the tiled floor. Tsunade and Shizune shared an amused glance. You do realize that you were almost an hour early, right? Asked Tsunade, leaning back in her chair. If you didn't want to wait, you should have arrived later. Ugh. Yeah, you have a point. Naruto had been too restless to sleep last night. Anyone else would have assumed it was the idea of going on a mission that kept him awake, but the truth was that he'd been unable to sleep before he received the messenger bird requesting he come to the Hokage's office. He'd been planning to speak with Tenten today and had been going over what he would say. Too bad that plan had been thrown out the window. You seem restless, Shizune said. Have you been sleeping well? Huh? Well, for the most part. Naruto's absent response, complete with rubbing the back of his neck, caused Tsunade and Shizune to share another glance. He would have wondered what sort of conversation they were having with those looks. However, he was too preoccupied to let himself be bothered by that. You wouldn't happen to be having some troubles in paradise, would you? Asked Tsunade as she leaned forward, placing her elbows on the desk and steepling her fingers together. Naruto grimaced. Is it that obvious? Tsunade smirked behind her hands. Brat, I have been around the block more times than you can count. Given how old you are, that doesn't surprise me, Naruto said, then had to dodge the paperweight Tsunade threw at him. With a large vein pulsing on her forehead, Tsunade said, you had better watch yourself. Mention my age again and I'll punch you through that wall. Hi. And don't sound so sarcastic. After snapping at him, Tsunade coughed into her hand several times as if clearing her throat. Anyway, my point is that while I've only been in love once, I know plenty about relationships between men and women. So you say, Shizune mumbled, though she quieted when the Hokage glared at her. Given who you are, it's not that hard to figure out what the problem is, Tsunade finished. Naruto didn't think he was that easy to figure out, but perhaps Jiraiya had told Tsunade about the relationships he had formed outside the village. It was true that, aside from Temari, there were 2 other women he'd become intimate with. With Jiraiya being the sleazebag that he was, Naruto didn't doubt the man had bragged about how his apprentice had banged multiple babes. Gyahaha. Thanks to my training, Naruto has become a demon in the sack. I swear that kid is a goldmine for ideas. It would probably have sounded something like that, Naruto imagined. He could clearly hear the man's words in his head. The doors opened just as this thought crossed his mind, prompting Naruto to turn around as 3 people entered the room: a large man with long hair and red armor, a blonde girl with blue eyes, and a familiar brown-eyed girl with buns on her head that made her look like a panda. As Kuji and Ino caught sight of Naruto, the 2 waved and smiled. Tenten, on the other hand, turned her nose at him. Still angry, I see. Yo, Naruto. Kuji greeted with a big smile. I'm guessing you're the Jonin in charge of this mission? That's right. Naruto grinned and puffed out his chest. I'm the one who's gonna be leading you guys. This should be interesting. Placing her hands on her hips, Ino smirked at him, blue eyes sparkling with amusement. I'm curious to see how a mission with you in charge will go. I hope that means you have confidence in my abilities. That remains to be seen. So I gotta prove myself, huh? Well, fine. I'll show you just what I can do. Hee, you had better. While Naruto spoke with Kuji and Ino, who had wandered right up to him without reservation, Tenten kept her distance, separating herself from the group to stand alone. She did her best not to pay him any attention. He almost sighed, but he held back and shored himself up, mentally slapping his cheeks. This was his chance. Tsunade gathered the 4 ninjas' attention with a cough. Everyone straightened, and Tenten reluctantly moved to stand behind Naruto alongside Kuji and Ino. We've received a request from Nadeshika Kanosato, Tsunade began. They're a ninja village whose families are organized through matrilineality. Naruto, I believe you have some experience with them. Naruto nodded. Jiraiya and I actually stayed there for a few months during our training. I'm sure training isn't all you did. He twitched at the woman's sly smile, but she didn't let him say anything before she continued. They are having a problem with a missing ninja who arrived in the area and indiscriminately attacked their village. We've received a report that a number of their kunoichi were killed and even more have been captured. The population of their village has dropped by about 40%, leaving them in dire straits. If they're suffering casualties like that, whoever attacked them must be incredibly powerful, Naruto said. Most of the kunoichi from Nadeshika Kanosato were easily Chunin and Jonin rank. Tsunade nodded. The person who attacked them is an S-ranked missing ninja who goes by the name Akuma. Very little is known about him. We're not even sure what village he is from or if Akuma is his real name. However, we do know that he was responsible for the complete destruction of a hidden village several years ago. Naruto had his own bingo book, and he'd made sure to memorize most of the names on there. He did actually know of Akuma. However, there wasn't any information on him outside of what Tsunade had just said. Nothing was known about his fighting style or where he came from. All the bingo book had was a profile picture. Your mission is to travel to Nadeshika Kanosato and help the village take down this missing ninja, Tsunade said. In response to her words, the group of 4 stood at attention. Hi, Tsunade-sama, they said in unison. Zox, because of what the mission entailed, it was listed as an A rank, which meant they needed to prepare the appropriate supplies. Naruto asked Kuji and Ino if they had everything they needed. When they said they didn't, he told them to grab enough supplies to last for 2 weeks. Then he traveled with Tenten to her shop so he could grab the appropriate weapons for an A-rank mission. Tenten barely spoke to him during this time. She only spoke when necessary, and when she did, her voice was colder than the snow-capped peaks of the former Yuki no Kuni. You realize that staying mad like this and scowling all the time is going to give you premature wrinkles, don't you? Asked Naruto. I'm not scowling, Tenten snapped. You are. I'm done with this conversation. Well, I'm not. They were in the middle of her store, traveling down one of the aisle. Numerous racks filled with various sharp and pointy implements landed. Because of this, Naruto couldn't push Tenten's back against the wall, so he created a wall of shadow clones and hemmed her in, placing his hands on a Naruto clone's shoulder to keep her from moving. What are you doing? Tenten's glare looked like a sheet of ice, but her cheeks were flushed a mild red. Let me go this instant. Not until you talk to me. I don't think there's anything to talk about. Yeah? Well, I think there is. Naruto narrowed his eyes. I get it. You're upset at me because I slept with Tamari. Tenten looked away. I don't care who you sleep with. Then why are you ignoring me? I just don't like lying douchebags. You're jealous of Tamari. I am not. You are. Not one bit. Just admit it. Their back and forth would have drawn a crowd if anyone aside from them had been present. It probably looked strange, several Narutos acting as a wall while one of them trapped the girl with his arms. Even Naruto found the idea strange. He probably would have laughed if he'd seen anyone else do this. That didn't stop him from arguing with the girl, whose face grew darker and more red as time passed. Finally. Alright. Fine. You want the truth? Yes, I'm jealous of Tamari. Yes, I hate that you slept with her. I thought we had something special, that I meant more to you, but I see now that you never felt the way about me that I did about you. I'm probably just another kunai in your pouch. Naruto kept his gaze even despite feeling something inside of him crack. A sharp pain pierced his chest, but he didn't reject it. What he felt now was nothing compared to what Tenten must be feeling. Do you really believe that? He gazed into Tenten's eyes as she stared right back. Her eyes were fierce, but the longer she stared at him, the less certain they became. She shifted her weight from her left foot to her right. Her hands began fiddling with her shirt. Yes, I do. She averted her gaze after several seconds had passed. Naruto continued to focus on her, making a slight sweat and a healthy blush break out on her face. He didn't say anything for the longest time, but then, he sighed and took a step back. The clones disappeared in a puff of smoke. I see. He took a moment to center himself as the cracks inside of him became wider. If that's how you feel, then there really is nothing I can do. He paused, withholding a shudder, and then continued. However, you should know something, Tenten. I cannot give you or anyone else a normal relationship. You already know I'm not human anymore, right? I don't have the ability to start a family and grow old together with you. Tenten's uncertain stare bolstered him for a moment, allowing him to harden his resolve. But you should know that just because I can't give you a normal relationship, that doesn't mean I don't love you. I'll understand if you don't want to be with me. If you say I can't be with you, then I'll gladly accept that. However, do not ever think that my feelings for you are weak, or that what we have isn't special to me. You are. You aren't someone who can ever be replaced. You're precious to me. Tenten didn't say anything at first. A cloying silence stretched out. While there was no tension, the thickness in the air, the uncertainty from both parties, made it hard to breathe. I'm not sure I can believe that, Tenten finally admitted. I guess not. Naruto smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Tenten pretended she didn't see it. After their argument ended, Naruto bought a scroll filled with enough supplies to last for 2 weeks and enough weapons for an A-rank mission. Fortunately, he didn't need to buy items like explosive notes or seals, since his seals were better than anything on the current market. That said, he did have a large number of kunai, smoke bombs, shuriken, and ninja wire. He wasn't sure how much of it he would use, but it was important to always be prepared. They met up with Ino and Kuji at the south gate. The two Chunin had arrived before them. When Ino saw the distance between him and Tenten, the fractured demeanors they both possessed, she placed her hands on her hips and frowned. What funeral procession did you two just come back from? No funeral, I'm afraid, Naruto said with a smile. Anyway, do you two have everything you need? Yup. Ino patted the pouch around her waist. It's all in here. Naruto nodded at her, then turned to the big guy in red armor. Kuji? I'm good. Right. Then let's go. Because he was in charge, Naruto was the one who signed them out of the gate. With the afternoon sun at their backs, the squadron of ninja left the village. Nadeshiko no Sato was located near Mizuno Kuni. It was located on the crescent-shaped peninsula that was composed of 3 separate nations, fire, tea, and noodles. To reach it, they had to travel southeast from Konoha, then curve around an inlet and head northeast, which would take them out of Hai no Kuni and into Udon no Kuni. On a side note, Nami no Kuni was not far from Nadeshiko no Sato. It was less than a day in fact. Because Naruto didn't know what the situation in Nadeshiko no Sato was, he urged his team to quicken their pace. They leapt through the trees whenever possible, stopped to sleep when it became dark, and ran across open plains when there was no forest to do their ninja tree jumping. Tenten did not speak much during this time, save for when Ino talked to her. Since there was no more that Naruto could say to her, having already said his piece, he left the girl to her own devices and spoke with Kuji. Before long, they reached the point where they could finally see Nadeshiko no Sato. "So that's it, huh?" Ino said with a hand over her head, acting as a visor to keep the sun out of her eyes. "Yup. That's Nadeshiko no Sato," Naruto answered. The village was positioned upon the lightly forested top of 3 massive, steep hills that all stood in a line. 2 bridges spanned the gorges between them. The central hill was the largest, meaning it also had the biggest structure. From where they stood, Naruto could see the stone walls surrounding the village. Several towers and roofs jutted from inside the walls. The village looked more like a stronghold or a palace, with numerous walls, towers, and brickwork being the predominant features. The hills upon which the female hidden village sat were situated within a lush, forested valley in a mountainous region. It made the village stand out. As they continued to admire the village, a bright light flared into existence on the side of the 3rd hill, and then a sound hit their ears. It was the rumbling of an explosion. Naruto narrowed his eyes when several chunks of land were blasted away from the hill. "That looked like it was from an explosive," Naruto muttered. "An explosive node or a jutsu? Look." Ino pointed at something. "The village is burning." Naruto didn't need to follow her finger to see what she meant. Smoke rose from within the village. Even as he watched, one of the towers located within the 3rd hill crumbled as it was struck by an explosion. More gouts of flame soon rose into the air in other locations too. They couldn't waste any more time. "Let's move," he ordered. "Right." Leaping off the branch they had been standing on, the group rushed toward the village. It was absolute chaos everywhere she looked. The village quaked and rumbled as explosion after explosion rocked the buildings. People ran everywhere, creating pandemonium no matter where she looked. Screams rent the air. Wails pierced the night. The clash of steel on steel echoed all around as smoke and ash rose high into the air. Shizuka cursed as several ugly brutes wielding swords rushed her from the left, right, and front. She slid around the first one to reach her when he thrust out his sword. It was a clumsy move. A rookie could have dodged it. Having ducked low, she came up, twisting her body to increase the power of her thrust as she slammed her wind-covered fist into his torso. Nadeshiko Ryuko Reppikan. The force of her strike produced a powerful shockwave that liquidized the man's insides, killing him instantly. As the dead thug soared through the air, Shizuka spun around and blocked a series of swift slashing attacks from another sword. She knocked the man's blade wide. Then, stepping into his guard, she delivered a swift series of jabs that left him stunned before. Finally, she leapt into the air, flipping around, and delivered a powerful falling kick. Nadeshiko Ryuko Senkaijuri. She had coated her leg in wind chakra to increase her cutting power. Her foot sliced straight through the man, who fell backward as blood gushed from his open wound, splattering against the ground and creating a pool underneath his corpse. Now on the ground, Shizuka spun around and delivered a powerful spinning heel kick to the jaw of another. The attack was so powerful that the man's neck snapped with a sickening crack. As he fell like a marionette with cut strings, Shizuka diverted a sword aimed at her torso, then stepped forward and delivered a bone-shattering punch to a bandit's torso. More than half a dozen thugs were still coming at her. They were further away, but it wouldn't be long before they closed the distance. If she was willing to let them. Nadeshiko Ryushinkunbu. Producing several kunai, Shizuka held them between each of her fingers, 4 per hand, and swiftly threw each one with pinpoint accuracy. Her kunai never missed their mark. One struck the neck of a thug. Another pierced one's left eye that one went down screaming. Still another slid between segmented samurai armor and pierced an enemy's heart. The bandits went down, some wailing in pain, while others died straight away. "Lady Shizuka." A voice called out as the last enemy near her died. A person dropped from the sky, landing in a crouch before her. She stood quickly, her imposing figure easily towering over the much smaller Shizuka. Her angular face was framed by short brown hair, and her lips were painted with a dark shade of red lipstick. Her backless red bodysuit was torn in several places. She wasn't wearing her usual mesh armor. The burns on her body led Shizuka to believe the armor had been destroyed. "Tokiwa, is it them?" asked Shizuka. "It is, Lady Shizuka." Tokiwa nodded in confirmation. "We've currently evacuated all of the civilians to the largest structures. We are doing our best to push back the invaders. Fortunately, it looks like Akuma is not with them this time." "Thank the gods for small miracles," Shizuka muttered before steeling herself. "Come. Let us push these invaders back." "Yes, Lady Shizuka." Together with her attendant, Shizuka joined the fight with the other kunoichi of her village. The world around her became one of blood and dying screams as she fought to destroy the people invading her home. The clang of clashing steel, the scent of iron in the air, a series of blurry images as she and her attendant fought their way through numerous enemies. However, it seemed there were even more enemies this time than last time. They filled the streets, bandits and lowlifes wielding swords and daggers. Her people were quickly overrun. To her left, a woman went down underneath a horde of disgusting vermin. They didn't kill her, though. One of the men jabbed something into the woman's thigh, which caused the young kunoichi's eyes to roll into the back of her head as her body went limp. Then the group lifted her up and none too gently began carrying her away. "Stop, scum!" Shizuka, Tokiwa, and the others tried their best to keep the girl from being taken, but there was a literal wall between the girl and them. It wasn't long before the group disappeared with her kunoichi. Shizuka wanted to go after them and reclaim her kidnapped kunoichi. She would have at least tried. However, she couldn't. More men were pouring in from all sides. They would overrun her ninja like a swarm of bugs, shoving the women of her village to the ground and injecting some kind of drug into their bodies before dragging them away. Shizuka fought desperately. She snapped one bandit's neck, crushed the skull of another, cut through multiple more, and even used one of her most powerful jutsu to wipe out over a dozen of them. Yet no matter how many she killed, more would always take their place. Before she knew it, the only ninja remaining by her side was Tokiwa and a handful of others. Despite the desperate panic she felt to rescue her comrades, Shizuka refused to give up. She stood back to back with her fellow kunoichi. The stench of numerous unwashed bodies made her nose wrinkle as the men closed in around her. If this was to be the end, she would make sure to take all of these people down with her. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Yet before she could steel herself for the next bout, several dozen figures suddenly invaded the area, rushing in from between buildings and jumping down from roofs. Some carried kunai. Some fought barehanded. Some even threw shuriken. They crashed against the bandits like an orange tidal wave, decimating the army that had been overwhelming Shizuka's forces with an even more overwhelming force. Beyond the shock of seeing so many people suddenly fighting against the bandits, Shizuka felt hope swell in her breast as she recognized who those people were. That's Naruto. Yes, it was dozens of Naruto clones that had rushed to her aid, and they weren't alone. With them were two other kunoichi. One of them, a pretty blonde girl who made several hand seals and somehow immobilized her enemies, who were then defeated when a massive man in red armor slammed into them with an enlarged arm. The last one was another kunoichi. She jumped from roof to roof, tossing kunai at a pace that even Shizuka was awed by. Every projectile thrown by the brown-haired girl was a kill shot. "The shinobi of the leaf are here to aid us," Shizuka roared. "Let us push these monsters back." Her fellow kunoichi shouted in approval and rushed forward, fighting against the bandits with renewed zeal. Shizuka found herself in the center of this brawl. She slammed into her enemies with wind-enhanced fists and feet, throwing all of her opponents away like they were ragdolls. As she continued to fight, she searched around the area, watching as some clones popped from getting injured. If the clones were here, then the real one was also somewhere within this throng. Shizuka whipped her head around as one of the Narutos slammed a Rasengan into a bandit's armored chest, tearing through both armor and flesh. As the bandit corpse was thrown into the air, the blonde man rushed up to her. This must be the real one. Naruto. Shizuka smiled even as she crushed someone's face in with a powerful punch. "I'm so glad to see you." Naruto's sunny grin lit a flame inside of her. "We'll talk later. For now, let's drive these assholes back." Right. The fighting did not last much longer as, with the arrival of Naruto and his Konoha Shinobi, the bandits seemed to lose their will to fight. Their numbers might have made them formidable, but Naruto could match those numbers with shadow clones. Also, unlike the bandits who couldn't replace the people they lost, Naruto could create new clones every time one of his were dispelled. Before long, the enemy that had once attacked them like a pack of ravenous hyenas tried to flee. "Do not let them escape," Shizuka shouted. "Asu!" came a shout from the Naruto clones as they charged after the bandits alongside the few kunoichi remaining. "Tokiwa! Lead our forces and rout the enemy." "Yes, Lady Shizuka." With the battle now concluded, Shizuka was able to relax. She lowered her arms, allowed her tense body to loosen up, and turned to survey her village. The battle had not moved past the two smaller hills that her village sat on, so they had not been able to breach what could more or less be described as their inner sanctuary. However, the attack had been so sudden that many of her people lay dead in the streets. She did not cry. Even so, the sting from unshed tears welled in her eyes as she saw the corpses of several non-combatants mixed in among the numerous bandits. "Shizuka." Naruto came up and placed a hand on her shoulder. She turned to him and almost allowed herself to fall prey to weakness, but now is not the time to be weak. Right now she needed to be strong. "I'm glad you are here," she said. "Sorry I didn't arrive sooner." Shaking her head, she couldn't find it in herself to smile, but she did her best to reassure him. "No. You could not have known this would happen. You arrived here even faster than I thought you would." "Thank you." "Yeah, well. When I heard you were in trouble, I wanted to get here as soon as I could." Naruto scratched the back of his neck, which finally caused her to crack a small smile. Even during situations like this, the mannerisms of the man before her remained unchanged, and that somehow reassured her that everything would be alright. Yes, perhaps with Naruto by her side, she could help her people. Ahem. A cough interrupted the mood they had. Shizuka turned to see the blonde and the brunette looking at them. One was wearing an amused smile like a Cheshire cat, while the other looked moody for some reason. "Who is this, Naruto?" asked the blonde girl. "A friend of yours? Or is she something more?" At this question, the girl raised her right hand, stuck out her pinky, and wiggled it for emphasis. Shizuka would have blushed at the blatant question regarding their relationship, but the situation was grave enough that she didn't have the time to feel embarrassed. Stepping away from Naruto, she bowed to the group of ninja. "Thank you for coming all this way. My name is Shizuka. I am the leader of this village and the one who requested help from Konoha." "Wait. Really?" The blonde's eyes practically bugged out of their sockets as she stared at Shizuka. But you're so young. I fail to see how my age makes me unfit to be leader." "Well, I guess it doesn't," the blonde admitted reluctantly. "I'm just surprised." Shizuka could understand where the girl was coming from, but now was not the time to indulge her. She bade Naruto and his squadron to follow her. Leaving the small hill, she wandered over the bridge that connected to the largest and most well-fortified of her village's stronghold. They passed a lot of injured women. Some were kunoikis who'd been injured during the battle but managed to retreat before they were taken hostage, but most of them were, in fact, civilians who had simply been caught up in the fight. A little girl sat on the ground, crying as a medic wrapped bandages around her injured head. A young woman with blood leaking from her shoulder was being patched up with stitches. Everywhere she looked, her people were suffering. It broke her heart. Naruto said, "Please help administer first aid to these people. The ones with the gravest injuries get top priority." "I'm on it," the blonde girl Ino said before rushing off to help the nearest person. "Ino has training as a medical ninja," Naruto explained when Shizuka sent him a questioning look. "She's not as talented as Sakura Haruno, my original teammate, but she's very skilled. I'm sure she'll be able to help heal everyone here." "Thank you," Shizuka said, bowing her head. Shizuka led the three Konoha ninja into a large room with a limestone floor and a vaulted ceiling. A table sat in the center, a series of tall columns arrayed around it. None of it was ostentatious. Both the table and columns were rather plain. However, the table sat atop a rug, and there were numerous fluffy pillows arranged around it for people to sit on. She sat down at the head of this table, calves tucked underneath her thighs, while Naruto and the others sat on either side of the table. Introductions followed. Naruto introduced his other two teammates. Kuji, the large man in wearing the red suit with plated armor, greeted her with a smile. However, the one called Tenten had a suspicious look in her eyes. Shizuka frowned. It was as if the girl didn't trust her for some reason. However, she ignored that and greeted them both in turn. "I was told that you were having trouble with a missing ninja named Akuma." Naruto scratched his cheek. "We weren't expecting to find an army of bandits attacking you." "Yes. I'm sorry. Please allow me to inform you about the most recent developments that have taken place." Shizuka bit her lip as she centered her thoughts. "It is true that the one who first attacked us was Akuma. He attacked our village without warning and decimated our forces. We fought back and even managed to injure him before he retreated, but his attack was so sudden that many of our kunoichi were injured and are unable to fight. That was when we sent our request to Konoha." "It sounds like something changed after you sent the request," Kuji said. Nodding, Shizuka continued. "A few days after our request was sent, Akuma came back and attacked again, but this time it was with a group of bandits. We fought them off. Tokiwa and I even managed to force Akuma into a standstill, but while we were distracted, the bandits who attacked our village made off with several of our kunoichi." Gritting her teeth, Shizuka hid her clenched fists underneath the table. "That's when we realized they were not after our lives but out bodies. I can only assume they plan on selling us as slaves." Slave trading was a huge business. While many countries had made it illegal to sell and own slaves, barring a few very unique circumstances like criminal slaves who were forced to work hard labor as punishment for crimes committed, that didn't stop people from buying or selling them. There were a number of black market operations spread across the elemental nations that dealt with slavery. "Do you know who's responsible for this?" asked Tenten. "Surely these bandits aren't working on their own. Most bandits use rusty and dull weapons. The ones those guys were wielding were brand new and high quality. They must have a powerful backer. Sadly, we do not know anything other than what I've just told you." Shizuka took a deep breath to contain her frustration at her own powerlessness. "I thought about sending some of my kunoichi out to see if we could gather intelligence, but..." "I understand," Naruto said when she trailed off. "Your kunoichi are what these people are after. If you had sent them out, and they were captured, you would be in even worse shape than you are now." "That is correct." Closing her eyes, Shizuka pushed the worry twisting her stomach into knots away. She stood up and gazed at Naruto, Tenten, and Kuji. "We can discuss what to do later. I'm sure everyone is exhausted from traveling all this way and being forced into battle so soon. Please allow me to show you to your rooms." Zox Tenten tossed and turned, unable to find a good position to sleep in. It wasn't the room. She and Ino had been given a comfortable room with 2 beds and plenty of amenities. The beds themselves were also quite soft and warm. It also wasn't their circumstances. Sure, what happened when they arrived was horrible, but she was a ninja and had seen far worse. Sighing as she realized that sleep truly was going to elude her for now, Tenten silently crept out of her bed and made her way out of the room. Ino was sleeping on the other bed, most of her body covered with a blanket, and she didn't wake up when Tenten slipped outside. The night air was mild. Tenten didn't feel cold or uncomfortable as she padded across the hallway in nothing but a shirt and panties. Of course, she kept a set of kunai with her in case she was attacked, but she didn't think that would happen. They drove off the attackers already. Those guys would need to regroup before they could attack again. Still, it never hurt to be prepared. She didn't know where she was going. Wandering the halls with no real destination in mind, she looked at the arched ceiling overhead. It had ribs supporting its structure and shape. They crossed each other multiple times to form geometric patterns. This place definitely had the feel of a palace. Naruto stayed in this place during his training. For whatever reason, that thought chilled her to the bone. She didn't like the idea of Naruto staying in this all-female hidden village. Given what she saw with Temari, she was sure that Naruto would know. She shook her head. Naruto might have slept with Temari, but he isn't the kind of guy who would cheat on someone like that. She could accept that Naruto didn't think of her in terms of romance. It would hurt, but she could do it. However, if nothing else, Tenten wanted to believe that Naruto wasn't the kind of guy who would cheat on a girl when they were dating. Yet even as these thoughts ran through her mind, Tenten caught someone walking along the hallway further down. They were nothing more than a shadow. She couldn't determine who it was. It caused the hair on her arms to prickle. She decided to follow them. Tenten wasn't the stealthiest kunoichi around, but she had been taught at least a little bit about sneaking. A ninja's greatest asset was intelligence gathering, after all. That required one to be sneaky. She kept to the walls and hid behind objects, following after the shadowy figure. It didn't take her long to figure out who the figure was. She wore a semi-translucent white gown that was tied together with a sash. No, it wasn't a gown. That was underwear. Negligee. While Tenten didn't use seduction techniques, she had been taught them, and she recognized the sexy sleepwear for what they were. With only the gown and white panties, Shizuka walked through the hall, her long black hair flowing freely instead of being tied into the ponytail she'd worn when they first met. Whereas she couldn't be. With her heartbeat quickening, Tenten followed Shizuka, being careful not to make a single noise, as the young woman wandered up to a door and knocked. Tenten felt her heart chill as she realized where the door led. This was the door to Naruto's room. Zox the group had been shown to their rooms. Ino and Tenten had been given a room to share, but Naruto and Kuji had been given their own rooms. When Ino had questioned that decision, Shizuka had stated that, as the leader, Naruto should have a room to himself, but then said that it wasn't appropriate for girls to be sleeping in the same room as a boy, which was why Kuji had his own room as well. Ino had accepted that with a pout and some complaining. Naruto lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling, thinking about the current circumstances he'd found himself in. Of course, he wasn't just thinking about this mission. Also on his mind was his estrangement to Tenten and Akane. He wondered if there was any way to fix this situation with them. Knock. 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 Sitting up, Naruto placed his hands on the bed and looked at the door. Knock. 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 He slid out of the bed and padded up to the door, wondering who could have been knocking at his hour. When he opened the door and found Shizuka standing before him, he blinked. "Shizu? What's up? Couldn't sleep?" Her long hair, blacker than the night sky but twice as scintillating, wavered as she shook her head. She crossed her arms over her chest. The act pushed her breasts together. Naruto looked down and noticed that, thanks to her semi-translucent gown, her nipples were visible as they strained against the fabric. "Do you mind if I come in?" she asked. "Not at all." Naruto moved out of the way and allowed Shizuka to enter the room. She walked past the wooden dresser and small table, the only decorations in the room, and made her way over to the bed. Watching her, Naruto slowly shut the door with a soft click as she sat down. "I'm guessing you're here for something other than talking," Naruto said. Shizuka smiled and blushed at the same time. "Am I that obvious?" "You never wear nightwear like that," Naruto pointed out. "People can change. They can, but there's not much point in wearing that if you're not trying to show off to someone, right? I guess." Naruto wandered back over to the bed and sat down beside Shizuka. She shifted, scooting closer as he propped one leg onto the bed, letting his foot hang over the edge. Unlike Shizuka, whose negligee was obviously meant for seducing people, Naruto only wore orange boxer shorts. The kunoichi glanced down at his chest and abs, trailed her eyes along his broad shoulders, and then looked even lower, at something currently hidden behind a thin layer of fabric. "It's been a long time, hasn't it?" Shizuka's cheeks turned pink as she looked away. "I mean, since the last time you and I saw each other." "About 6 months, Naruto said. "You've become a lot stronger since the last time I saw you." Shizuka's smile was self-deprecating. "If I was stronger, my kunoichi would have never been kidnapped like this. I would have been able to protect them." "You're only one person." Naruto shrugged. He didn't want to sound nonchalant, but she also needed to know the facts. One person can protect an entire village from an army. You've done everything you can. You even fought Akuma to a standstill, right? He's an S-ranked shinobi. The fact that you could force him to retreat is impressive. I had help. It doesn't change how impressive it is. Perhaps she sensed the sincerity in his words. She turned her head back in his direction and looked up at him. Her eyes were a lot more open than they used to be. He remembered when they first met, her eyes had been cold and emotionless, though that had slowly changed after a while. "Do you really think so?" she asked. "I do." Shizuka was silent for a long while. He didn't mind, letting the silence play out as he glanced at her hair. It was so long that it trailed across the bed. Naruto was surprised she hadn't decided to cut it, but he was also glad since he liked her hair long. "Even if it's an impressive feat on its own, I wish there had been something I could have done to prevent my people from being kidnapped." That was the crux of her problem. As someone who had once strived to become Hokage, Naruto could understand how she felt. Her duty was to protect her people. However, Akuma and those bandits had kidnapped several of her kunoichi, who would probably be sold on the slave market in the next couple of days. Naruto scooted closer. The warmth of her thigh came into contact with his shin. "We still have time to rescue them." He placed a hand on her thigh. "Kunoichi are difficult to sell on the slave market because they are defiant. They require a lot more effort to break and train. I imagine it will be at least a month or two before any of them will be considered sellable, which means we have time to rescue them." Naruto didn't like thinking in terms like this, but he'd become fairly knowledgeable about the slave market, having busted up numerous slave trading rings during his time training with Jiraiya. He knew how they worked now. That was why he could confidently state they had time before her people would be sold. Shizuka seemed to take solace in this. She looked up, eyes wide, and then a smile appeared on her lips. "Thank you, Naruto. Anytime." Naruto smiled a bit, though the reassuring smile soon became a bit lascivious as he moved his hand from the top of her thigh to her inner thigh. "I'm glad I could help reassure you. But we both know that isn't why you came here." Shizuka's eyes went wide, cheeks flushing as Naruto stroked the area where her thigh and crotch met. "And no. If you really just wanted me to reassure you," Naruto continued, "you wouldn't have come to me dressed like this, right? That's just. Naruto didn't give Shizuka time to respond as he leaned down and nibbled on her ear. A gasp escaped her mouth. Her breathing became slightly ragged. "What do you want, Shizuka?" asked Naruto, whispering into her ear. Shizuka shivered. I want you. Please. It's been so long." It has been a long time." Naruto leaned down further and began placing kisses on her neck. At the same time, he had reached her crotch and was rubbing his hand over her panties. Warm and already slightly wet, her lips yielded at his touch, folds creasing as her panties clung to her damp skin. "I have missed you, Shizu." Ah. Ha. Na Naruto." Shizuka turned her head and pressed their lips together. Her soft lips were warm and gentle. They were slightly plump, which made nibbling on them fun. He took great pleasure in taking her lips between his and sucking on them. Ha. Ha. On. Slurp. The sounds coming from Shizuka's mouth were hampered by Naruto's tongue. He ran his tongue over hers, stirring up the saliva in her mouth, mixing it with his own. Shizuka gulped it down as lewd slurping noises issued from her mouth. She couldn't drink all of it, however, and several trails of drool leaked from between their lips, though neither of them cared. Ah. Naruto. Her muffled mumbling was accompanied by her hands rubbing his crotch over his boxers, quickly arousing his dick from slumber. Once she had made him hard, she worked him out from the hole in his boxers and wrapped her fingers around his shaft. NNNGG. Shizu. That feels so great, Naruto mumbled between kisses and dueling tongues. Your fingers are so soft. But so strong too. I'm glad. On. Naruto felt an electric current race through him as Shizuka stroked him from the base all the way to the head, which she would rub and tease before going back down. Her hands were soft and delicate, but they were also strong. The calluses from years of training with weapons had created a contrasting feel that sent pulses through his cock. You've gotten. Slurp. You've gotten so wet. Shizu. It's your. It's your fault. That I'm like this. Ha. Take responsibility. I plan to. Her panties had become soaked as he stroked her lips over them. They creased and folded against her nether regions. He could even feel her clitoris poking against the now sodden fabric. He'd noticed it already, but her panties were held up via strings tied together on either side, so he reached out and found the bow tying it to her, then undid them. Because of how wet her panties had become, they clung to her skin. He peeled them off. Now exposed, Shizuka instinctively tried to close her thighs, but Naruto reached down and placed his hand over her sex. On. Shizuka jerked away from his lips and threw her head back to release a passionate cry. Her body shook, tits jiggling and bouncing as she spasmed like she'd been shocked with a lightning jutsu. Don't tell me you just came, Naruto said with an amused smile. Her hand had stopped stroking him, but he didn't mind. Shut up. Shizuka huffed. I haven't done anything for a long time. That so? Naruto hummed. Then you might want to brace yourself. Naruto didn't give Shizuka time to say anything as he pushed his index finger past her folds. It didn't take much effort on his part. The moment he'd moved past her lips, his finger was sucked inside of her. The tightness of her walls closed around his finger, fleshy and soft, with natural lubrication allowing him to just barely move around. Ah. Listening to Shizuka's cries, Naruto worked his finger along her fleshy interior, retracting and pushing as he searched for the places where her reactions were strongest. Shizuka bit her lip to keep her screams muffled. She'd also decided to pay him back and was stroking him with more pressure than before. His breathing had grown heavy as pre-cum leaked from his tip, which she used to lubricate her hand so it slid along his shaft more easily. On. And not there. If you stroke me there, Naruto used his memories of their time together to find the spot inside of her that felt spongier than the rest. There was a strange springiness to it that the other places inside of her didn't have. Once he found it, Naruto didn't waste time pressing and rubbing against it with the tip of his index finger. Wait. It's too much. I can't. An increased flow of juices moved around his hand, leaking from her love canal and dripping from her crotch onto the bed. Despite her body shaking from aftershocks, she continued pleasuring him. Naruto leaned down and licked up the drool trailing from her lips. Shizuka turned her head toward him and opened her mouth, allowing him to push his tongue inside of her. As their tongues dueled and danced, they continued pleasing each other. Naruto could tell she was close again from the way her thigh muscles tightened and quivered. What's more? Shizu. I'm close. And me too. Naruto. Oh. Naruto. Once she admitted to being close, Naruto placed his thumb against her clit and rubbed it, causing Shizuka's entire body to spasm as every muscle tightened. He didn't know if it was in response to his actions, but her hand suddenly picked up the pace. As her juices exploded against his hand, fluids gushing from inside of her, he felt his own impending release build up before, without warning, he splashed his seed against her hand. Shizuka fell back on the bed, letting go of him. Her eyes were glazed over as her breasts jiggled. Retracting his fingers from her crotch, Naruto licked his hand clean. He sensed eyes on him and looked at Shizuka. Her eyes were glazed over, But she noticed his actions, and her already blushing cheeks took on a healthy flush as he licked her juices off. "You taste delicious, Shizu," Naruto said. "I think you might be my favorite treat." Don't say that," she mumbled. Naruto grinned. "Why not?" Because it's weird." Shizuka looked away. Still wearing his signature fox-like grin, Naruto rolled over until he was on top of Shizuka. He pushed her legs apart and situated himself between them. He was still harder than a diamond jutsu. Moving his hips, he rested himself against her warm and sopping wet entrance. Her lips gave way as he rubbed himself along them, not inserting his dick into her yet. That. Why? So good." Shizuka panted as he slowly sawed back and forth. Her breasts were jiggling from the resulting actions. Naruto wanted to lean over and play with them, but there was something he had to do first. "Shizu," he caught her attention, "I want to be inside of you. May I?" Her face was mottled red, but she still responded to his request with a nod. "Why yes. Please. I want you to fill me up." With her permission, Naruto stopped rubbing herself against him, lined himself up, and slowly pushed inside of her. "Ooh. I forgot how full your cock made me," Shizuka groaned. "This is nothing like my fingers. It's HHHHHRRRNNN." Naruto took a deep breath as Shizuka's insides wrapped around him in a tight, wet embrace. She was tight enough that he almost released his load right then and there. Damn. He needed to exercise some restraint. Leaning over, Naruto used one hand to support his body while he grabbed her chest with the other. Shizuka released a soft sigh when he rolled her nipple between her fingers. The soft bud quickly hardened as he continued to play with it. "Are you okay?" he asked. Shizuka nodded. "I'm okay. You can move now. I'll go gently at first," Naruto said. He retracted his dick until just the head was inside of her, then slowly pushed into her. Shizuka released a long ooh. As he moved, and he had to keep a tight lock on his own desires as something akin to electricity jolted his body. Naruto did this for a few more minutes before she told him he could go faster, then picked up the pace, slowly at first, but with increasing intensity. Oh. Naruon. That feels so good. Ah. Ha. Your dick is filling me up. NNN. I hope you don't mind. But I plan on filling you with more than just my dick. Yes. I want you to fill me up. Shoot your batter into me. Oh, gods. HRK. You're hitting my womb. On. Ha. Hike. My mind is going blank. Can't. On. The lute sound of their flesh slapping together was accompanied by the pants, grunts, and moans the two released as Naruto thrust into her. Shizuka's body shook. Her stomach, tight and well-muscled from years of training, trembled at their love-making. The large breasts that sat proudly on her chest bounced every time he thrust inside of her, which he took great pleasure in doing. Over and over again. Oh, gods. Shizuka's spine arced as she placed her feet on the edge of the bed, spread her legs wide, and lifted her hips. You're going even deeper than HRK. Hyuk. I can't. Naru. Too much. Too deep. Despite her words, Shizuka wrapped her legs around him, locking her ankles against the small of Naruto's back and using her heels to drive him further into her, as if helping him penetrate even deeper into her womb. Naruto felt the inevitable release soon. It coiled around him, building up like a volcano. Shizu. Me too. Together. On. Ha. Please. Together. Naruto waited until he felt Shizuka's insides become unbearably tight, until her body shook with the intensity of her own orgasm, to release himself inside of her. Ahnn. Shizuka released a loud cry as her body tensed, every muscle growing unbearably stronger. Her legs tightened around him, it would have snapped the bones of anyone else. Naruto gritted his teeth and clenched his eyes as a wave of overwhelming sensations rocked his body. Then, all at once, it was over, and Naruto took several deep breaths as Shizuka's legs went slack. Ha. As he recovered, Naruto looked at Shizuka, who was staring off into space with a pleased smile on her lips. He zeroed in on her lips. Moist, pink, slightly bruised from their kissing. Drool leaked from them, but that made her look even more erotic. He couldn't resist the urge to kiss her. Hnn. Naru. Ha. The sloppy exchange complete with tongue and drool stirred up Naruto's passions again. He hardened while still inside of her. Her eyes went wide in disbelief. I can't believe. You're already hard. Do you want to stop? Shizuka shook her head. Let's keep going. I haven't seen you in so long. I don't want this to end just yet. In that case. Naruto stood back up and pulled out. Shizuka groaned in complaint, but it soon turned into a squeal when he flipped her onto her stomach. Grabbing her hips, Naruto lifted her butt into the air. Perhaps realizing his intentions, Shizuka tucked her legs beneath her and raised her hips as he lined himself up with her entrance. Their cries of passion filled the room once more. Little did they know that someone else was watching them. Zox Tenten could not believe her eyes, and though she tried to look away, her eyes refused to remove themselves from the crack in the door. She had followed Shizuka here. When Naruto entered and let Shizuka inside, she had pressed her ear against the door and listened to their conversation. It had been intimate. Very intimate. Tenten had actually felt bad for eavesdropping on them, but then something had changed. The sounds coming from the room were less conversation and more animalistic cries of pleasure. Against her better judgment, Tenten had opened the door and peeked inside. What she saw rooted her to the spot. Naruto and Shizuka were having sex. Hot. Passionate. Love-making. Their sweaty bodies converged together, their tongues danced, their moans created a symphony that complemented their every action. It was just like when Naruto and Temari had gone at it. Tenten had wanted to run away like she did back in Suna. She didn't. Her body had remained rooted to the spot. What's more, as she watched Naruto and Shizuka go at it, her own body became hot, overwhelmingly so. Ah! Clamping a hand over her mouth, Tenten felt heat spread across her face and neck. She looked down. Somehow, without her realizing it, her other hand and pressed against her crotch. I shouldn't be doing this. Even though she knew she needed to stop, her body refused to listen, and she peeked back into the door while slipping her hand into her panties and finding her entrance. She watched Naruto and Shizuka have sex, listened to their cries and moans of passion, and pleasured herself. She felt shame while doing so. Sure, she'd masturbated before. She'd even done so while thinking about Naruto, but that was different than what she was doing just then. How would she ever be able to look him in the eye after this? Despite of her shame, she kept going, pushing her finger inside of her, playing with her clit. When Naruto and Shizuka hit their first mutual orgasm, Tenten had to bite down on her shirt to muffle her screams as she also came. She didn't stick around as Naruto and Shizuka began going at it again. Standing on shaky legs, she closed their door and slowly made her way back to the room she shared with Ino. She crawled underneath the covers and closed her eyes, but sleep didn't come for a long time. The image of Shizuka and Naruto, of Naruto and Temari, kept replaying in her mind over and over again. Akuma sat on the bed afforded to him by his employer, feet planted firmly on the ground. A rustling behind him let him know the bed warmers were shifting in their sleep. There was a low mumble. The shifting soon stopped. If he looked back, he knew what he would see, a pair of naked bodies, nubile flesh covered with a blanket. The two on the bed with him were not but slaves. His employer had given him these two to do with as he pleased. They were nothing special, a cute pair of girls who'd had the misfortune of being sold off by their families. He didn't know anything about them beyond that. He didn't care to know. He was completely naked, like the two still sleeping, but unlike their perfectly unblemished skin, his rippling body was covered in scars. Akuma had lost track of how many scars he had. Several crisscrossed over his chest and stomach, many lined his shoulders and back, and quite a few stood out against the dark skin of his legs. Among the many scars were several large, ugly bruises. Unlike the scars, which were old, these bruises were recent. He'd gotten them during his fight with that Kunoichi leader and her attendant. They didn't hurt. In fact, he couldn't even feel them, but still, the fact that he had been injured left a profound impact on him. It caused a grin to curl at his lips. "It's good to see there are still people who can put up a fight," he murmured. "NGG." A soft moan made him look back. One of the girls shifted again, her pink lips opening as she stirred, though she didn't wake up. He stood up and put on some underwear and pants, but he left his chest exposed and didn't bother putting on sandals. The black pants were all he needed. His room was quite lavish, though it didn't contain much. Aside from the comfortable bed and dresser with his pants, there was nothing else, no art, no decorations, nothing. A warrior such as himself didn't need anything else. Leaving the room, Akuma wandered a well-lit hallway that was far too opulent for his taste. He ignored the gaudy art as the floor beneath his feet swayed slightly. Turning a corner, he traveled down a flight of stairs, then entered a door that opened into a large chamber. It looked almost like a medical facility combined with a prison. Instead of medical equipment, however, what this room contained were numerous stables with powerful straps that not even a high-level ninja could break. There were also a set of cages on the far side. As he walked further into the room, the cage's contents came into view. People. Women. Most of these women were young, clearly in their late teens to their mid-20s, though a few were younger than that. None of them had a stitch of clothing on. Bare as the day they were born, the women huddled against the cages to fight against the shame they felt at being so exposed. This was a standard tactic used to break slaves. Deeper in the room were several people, a man and a woman. They stood before a table that another woman was strapped to. Like the others, she was naked. Every so often she would squirm and groan as the woman injected something into her. Judging from how compact and defined her muscles were, the woman being subjected to numerous mind-breaking drugs was a kunoichi. Despite being injected with quite a few unknown substances, the female ninja glared defiantly at the two. Akuma suspected she would have shouted expletives at them, but a ball gag kept her from talking. She's resisting the drugs quite well, the woman said. That's a kunoichi for you, I guess. I've heard the kunoichi from Nadeshika no Sato are a cut above the rest. The man stroked his jaw. How long will it take to break her? Longer than it has anyone else. An immediate answer. The woman set the syringe on a tool tray. I suspect it will take pumping her body full of drugs for at least a month before she's ready to be processed and sold. The man frowned. I had been hoping it would take less time. We could do it in less time, but that would require physically breaking them, which you want to avoid, right? The woman shrugged. Damaging such valuable merchandise will hurt your business, won't it? The two before Akuma were rather disgusting individuals. The man was short and had frizzy hair. At a glance, he looked to be about 140 centimeters at most, but then anyone looking long enough would realize that his hair gave him an extra 6 or 7 centimeters. He wore a crisp and clean business suit. It gave him a business tycoon flair, but Akuma couldn't take the man seriously. His partner was even creepier, with a tall and thin body that reminded him of a twig, bulging gray eyes, and stringy hair that looked like worms crawling out of her skull. Her black pants and black shirt were hidden by a large white coat that went all the way down to her shins. With such a dubious appearance, Akuma could only think of her as a mad scientist. Shato, Akuma said. The man and woman turned. Akuma. Shato's eyes flashed as he greeted the much larger man with an insincere smile. I see you are back on your feet. I'm surprised it took so long for your injuries to heal. They are not healed, but they have never bothered me. I can keep fighting. That's good, Shato said, nodding as the woman went back to injecting drugs into the kunoichi. I have some news that you might like. What news is that? Asked a now frowning Akuma. Shato's eyes flashed. According to one of my men who made it back from their last assault on the Nadeshiko village, a group of Konoha ninja have arrived to help them. Konoha ninja? Akuma felt his blood begin boiling at the knowledge. A surge of joy filled his chest as his warrior spirit surged with primal longing. Who? A powerful ninja known as Naruto Uzumaki, Shato said, causing Akuma's lips to peel back into a feral grin. Zox, the early morning sun illuminated Nadeshika no Sato and the area around it, highlighting the damage done yesterday during the attack perpetrated by the large group of bandits. Several towers had collapsed. A number of walls had crumbled, their remains scattered along the ground. At least the dead bodies had been removed and buried. Sadly, there was no time for the people of this village to mourn their dead. Over 1 week had passed since Naruto and his team arrived in the village. They had used the time wisely by helping everyone else wherever they could. Many of the village's kunoichi were already up. They couldn't leave the village in this state, so they were doing their best to repair what they could. Powerfully built women moved to and fro, carrying thick beams that were used to prop up damaged structures, or using earth jutsu to mold the earth around them into bricks, which were then set atop the walls slowly being repaired. Among all the women doing their best to repair the damage to their home, another group raced about, doing what they could. All of them looked the same. They wore clothing that was predominantly black but had orange interspersed, blonde hair arrayed in many spikes on their heads, bright blue eyes, and whisker marks on their cheeks that reminded all who looked at them of a fox. The Naruto clones were a great help. Sure, they couldn't create bricks using earth jutsu, but they were excellent pack mules. Many of the kunoichi had the clones aiding them by gathering supplies. It helped that there were so many. Just standing in one spot of the village, a person could easily spot at least 100 Naruto clones. How many clones did you make? Asked Ino as she, Kuji, Tenten, and Shizuka observed the repair efforts being undertaken. Naruto was also there, of course. He stood beside Shizuka, close enough to denote familiarity but far enough that no one would realize they had been having sex almost every night since he arrived. Maybe about 1,000? Naruto tilted his head. I thought about making more, but I think any more than 1,000 would just hamper the repair process. 1,000 shadow clones? Seriously? Ino's eyes were popping from their sockets. I know you have a lot of chakra, but damn. Should we also help with the repairs? Asked Kuji. Shizuka shook her head. No. Thank you for the offer, but I have something else I'd like you to do. And what's that? Asked Tenten, who was acting even stranger than usual for some reason. She'd been giving Naruto the cold shoulder all morning, a shoulder that was even colder than before, but then he'd catch her staring at him. Every time he caught her, she'd turn her head and look away. I'd like you to help my people locate Akuma's base of operations, Shizuka stated. I currently have Tokiwa trying to track where the bandits from last night disappeared to. With luck, she'll have some knowledge of their whereabouts when she gets back. Most of the morning was spent directing people as repairs continued. Naruto asked Ino to join up with the Nadeshiko Kunoichi's medical squad. The Kunoichi of this village weren't as talented in medical ninjutsu as she was. They used standard medic practices most regular doctors performed, but only one or two were actually capable of using true medical ninjutsu. Her help would be invaluable. They also ate some breakfast. Sadly, it wasn't much. With the continuous attacks on the village, they hadn't been able to resupply for a while, so their food supplies were limited. Nadeshiko no Sato was not a self-sustaining village like Konoha, which had numerous fields, gardens, and farms specifically catering to the creation of foods and raising livestock. When they needed food, they went hunting for wild boars and other animals, picked fruits and berries from the forest, and bought sacks of rice and flour from the nearby village. Sorry I don't have much food, Shizuka apologized as Naruto, Kuji, Ino, and Tenten ate breakfast with her in the meeting room. It's much. It's fine. Kuji spoke between mouthfuls of food. I stocked. Munch. Plenty of food. Much. That I can share with everyone. Shizuka smiled. I appreciate that. The food that had been prepared for them was nothing fancy, a simple fare of bread and bagels with some spreads and berries. When Shizuka had said they didn't have much, she had really meant it. This was some of the last remaining bits of food. Naruto felt bad they were wasting it on him and his team, but Shizuka had insisted. I'll create some clones and have them forage later. Is this really all you have? Asked Ino as she slowly nibbled on a bagel. Tenten sat next to her, listening in on the conversation but not offering to say anything in turn. It is. Shizuka took a shuddering breath as if recalling something unpleasant. Because our village can't sustain itself, I send a squadron to a nearby village to buy supplies. However, the ones I sent out never came back. I sent out another squadron, thinking something must have happened to them along the way, but that squadron also disappeared. I eventually went out myself, bringing almost a dozen of my most trusted kunoichi, and we discovered what appeared to be the scene of a great battle. Biting her lip, Shizuka smeared some jam on her toast and took a slow bite. Her eyes glazed over as she chewed. There were a few corpses, but they were all bandits and thugs. None of our kunoichi were among them. One of my kunoichi specializes in forensic and tracking. She was able to figure out from the scene that our kunoichi had been kidnapped. Once I realized someone was targeting us, I stopped sending out kunoichi, but that's when Akuma attacked. Shizuka's grave expression was slightly ruined by the jam on her face. Naruto sighed as he leaned over and used his finger wipe off the jam. Returning back to his original position, he inserted the finger into his mouth and licked it clean. The act was so natural that he hadn't even realized he'd done it until Ino whistled at him. Ho ho. The blonde girl's blue eyes sparkled as they darted back and forth between the two. You two seem pretty close. Is there something you aren't telling us? Naruto froze as he realized his mistake several seconds too late. Should he say something? It wasn't like he cared if people found out about his relationships. Shizuka, Tamari, Koyuki, all of them already knew about each other, and they were the ones whose opinions and thoughts mattered the most. It didn't matter to him if someone else found out. Yugi Ito also knew. However, their relationship had yet to move beyond simple flirting. Before he could say anything, Shizuka spoke up, her expression quite serious. Naruto and I are very close. We are lovers, after all. While Ino's eyes went wide with delight, the delight of a gossiper who discovered a juicy piece of information, Kuji began choking on his food. He coughed several times and pounded his chest to dislodge it. Meanwhile, Tenten froze. Of all the people present, her reaction was the most surprising, mainly because she didn't look surprised. When did this happen? How did this happen? Naruto, you dog. Why didn't you say anything? Asked Ino, who who looked so joyful she could hardly contain herself. The girl was practically drooling as she leaned over and looked between him and Shizuka. It happened during the time I spent training here. Obviously, Naruto maintained a calm mask. And I didn't say anything because it's not important to the mission. Let's focus on how we can help the village instead of my love life, yeah? Aww. That's no fun. Come on. Ino wore what might have been the most lecherous grin he'd ever seen on a girl. You can tell me about it. I promise I won't tell anyone else. Naruto gave his fellow blonde a deadpan stare. I wouldn't trust the promise of a gossip if my life depended on it. In either event, there's really nothing to tell. We met up, trained together for several months, and became intimate. That's all there is to it. With a heavy sigh, Ino leaned back. What a boring story. Naruto rolled his eyes. Sorry for being boring, breakfast continued, but this time, Ino and Kuji kept stealing glances at him. Naruto would have sighed if that wouldn't have broken his mask. It wasn't like he couldn't understand their curiosity. From their perspective, he probably wasn't that great of a catch to begin with, and they likely wondered why someone like Shizuka was so interested in him. Well, Ino was probably wondering that. Kuji was likely just curious. The big lug had been one of Naruto's friends since their academy days, and he was too kind to think poorly of someone else. Naruto looked at Tenten. The brown-haired girl was still nibbling on a bagel, ignoring the rest of the world. For whatever reason, the air around her felt even colder than before, but then, he reasoned that she probably didn't like hearing about how he was intimate with yet another woman. First Tamari and now Shizuka? Yeah, he could see how she'd be pissed. I get the feeling I'm never going to make things right with her. Maybe he should give up? The thought had occurred to him more than once that giving up on Tenten might be the better idea, but Naruto was stubborn, and he had no desire to give up. If, after the air between them was cleared, she decided she wanted nothing to do with them, then Naruto would back off. However, he would keep fighting until he resolved the tension between them. If nothing else, he didn't want to lose Tenten's friendship. As they finished off the remainder of their breakfast, Tokiwa entered the room and knelt before Shizuka. Have you found anything? The young village leader gazed at the woman. Tokiwa bowed her head. We have not found the bandits or their hideout. However, we did manage to locate something that I believe may lead to it. Several clicks from the nearest village is a mine. It goes underneath the mountains and, we suspect, the ocean. According to several maps we managed to acquire, it leads to another exit near Nami no Kuni. We've investigated the mine, and there are signs that people have been using it. And you believe the ones using it are the kidnappers? Asked Shizuka. Yes. Shizuka cupped her chin and furrowed her brow. Naruto gazed at her before looking back at Tokiwa. Thinking about the situation, there was a good chance that this mine led to their hideout, or was close to it. At the same time, there was a chance they weren't using it at all. It could have been something they did to obscure their whereabouts, making the kunoichi of this village think the bandits were using this mine when they were actually stationed even closer. Nami no Kuni. The land where Naruto had been given his first taste of what being a shinobi meant. If he was correct, Nami no Kuni lay to the north of here, beyond the mountains. The cavern would have also needed to travel underwater since this village was located on a peninsula. It would have taken at least a week for normal people to travel. How long would it take a group carrying several unconscious kunoichi? Shizuka? Naruto suddenly grabbed the girl's attention. Yes? How many times have Akuma and the bandits attacked, and how long are the spaces between each attack? Shizuka tilted her head. They've attacked us 3 times. The first time it was just Akuma. He attacked, was pushed back, and then attacked again about 1 week later with a group. After that, we didn't receive an attack until just yesterday. Which meant they hadn't been attacked after that second time for over 3 weeks, according to the date on the mission request, which had been received by Konoha via Carrier Hawk. 3 weeks was about the time it took for a Carrier Hawk to travel from here to Konoha. Of course, it would take about a week and a half to go from here to Nami no Kuni if someone traveled in a straight line. That meant there was a high possibility these people were, in fact, using the mine to travel from Nami no Kuni to here. Would you allow Kuji and I to investigate this mine? Asked Naruto. You two will do it? Tokiwa questioned. Nodding, Naruto turned to Shizuka. We'll travel through the mine and dig around Nami no Kuni to see if we can uncover the location of these slave traders. I'll have Ino and Tenten stay behind to help protect you, and I'll set up a perimeter of shadow clones to patrol the forests. In the event that he was wrong, his shadow clones could dispel and alert him to trouble if Nadeshika no Sato came under attack. After pondering his suggestion for a moment, Shizuka nodded. That sounds acceptable. I can't send any of my kunoichi out for obvious reasons. I would go myself, but... I understand. Grinning, Naruto thumped his chest. Just leave it to us. Smiling and nodding at his unbridled enthusiasm, Shizuka agreed with his proposal. About 1 hour after breakfast, Naruto and Kuji set off for the aforementioned mine with Tokiwa as their guide. While there was a lot of work to be done, Shizuka delegated most of the repairs to Tokiwa, who was excellent at handling administrative work. Fortunately, there was no need to patrol the perimeter either. Naruto had created almost 2,000 clones for that task. While shadow clones were weak, they were good enough to alert everyone to the presence of a potential enemy. With one Naruto walking alongside her, Shizuka made her way toward the edge of her village. She wandered past buildings until she reached the outer wall, climbed up a set of stone stairs, and found the person she was looking for gazing out at the vast forest. The defensive wall surrounding Nadeshika no Sato was a fortification used to protect the village from potential aggressors. Like most of the village, it was a masonry structure made of numerous thick bricks bound together with mortar. Another, smaller wall, lined the outer edge of the fortification, though it was only about chest high. Several gaps marked where archers and long-range weapon users could rain arrows and kunai down on opponents trying to attack from the outside. Not that it had done much good against the slavers in Akuma. "Stay here please," Shizuka said to the Naruto clone, who gave her a silly salute and remained where he was. Shizuka walked up beside Tenten. While the girl didn't turn around, she had to have noticed Shizuka's presence by this point. The fact that the weapon expert hadn't addressed her meant she was being ignored. "You know, Naruto spoke an awful lot about you when he and Jiraiya came to this village," Shizuka said. "That so?" was all Tenten said in response. He would always talk about this girl he knew from Konoha. How she was an amazing weapons expert, how she was really strong, and how he admired her tenacity. Tenten didn't say anything, but her cheeks did grow a dark red as Shizuka continued to talk. Despite this, her face remained blatantly cold, perhaps even angry. "Do you hate me?" Shizuka asked. "No. I just don't really like you." Shizuka smiled in spite of herself. "At least you are honest." Naruto had once said that Tenten was one of the most stubborn people he had ever met, that she rarely changed her feelings on certain matters, and that once she made up her mind, neither heaven or earth could change it. Shizuka was starting to see what he meant. She clasped her hands behind her back and looked, not at Tenten, but at the sky above. "When I first met Naruto, I was in a very dark place. The man I loved had been killed, leaving me heartbroken. I felt like I would never be able to love again. I stopped loving because I didn't want to feel the terrible ache that comes from losing someone you cherish, and I pushed myself to become stronger so I would never have to feel that way." Shizuka paused to find Tenten staring at her out of the corner of her eye. The girl hurriedly looked away when she was caught, causing Shizuka to smile. "Tokiwa thinks I was punishing myself, and maybe I was." Silence blanketed them. Tenten refused to speak. Shizuka let the silence stretch on and gazed at the line that connected the earth and sky before continuing. "Long ago, Jiraiya fought my master, who had recognized his strength and wanted him to marry her and help produce strong offspring. They fought, but neither of them won. Then they made a promise that their fight would continue some other time, and if they couldn't fight, then their students would fight in their place." Shizuka paused again, reached up, and began playing with her hair. "My people have a law that we can only marry men who are stronger than us. When a man defeats us, we take them back to the village and have children with them. This is done in order to make sure our clan only sires strong offspring." Shizuka could tell by the way Tenten was leaning over that she was interested in this story, but still the girl refused to say anything. "The man I loved, Seijiri, was a merchant. He was neither strong nor skilled in combat. It was against our laws for me to marry him, but I loved him anyway and was determined to change our laws. However, Seijiri was soon ambushed and killed. There was even a rumor going around that a group of kunoichi from my village had done it, though it was never proven." Shizuka sighed as the familiar ache appeared in her chest. She still loved Seijiri very much. However, the pain itself had dulled since meeting Naruto. No longer was it an overbearing burden. Now it was just a scar that had healed. Naruto was the one who rescued me from that hell. His determination and resolve to make his loved ones happy reminded me of my own dreams and desires. He helped me overcome the pain in my heart, and during our time together, I fell in love with him." Traveling back in time, Shizuka replayed the moments she and Naruto had spent together in her mind. Their first meeting had actually been coincidental. Naruto had been coming out of a ramen shop, and Shizuka had been fighting against a man who used puppets. The man had actually created 100 puppets and had her defeat all of them so he could use a jutsu that bound her. Naruto had rescued her from him with ease. That was when Jiraiya showed up. As he had promised all those years ago, Shizuka and Naruto fought. Naruto had won. However, he refused to marry Shizuka and said they should train together instead, so she could become strong enough to change her village's laws. His words had moved her. For about 2 months, she and Naruto trained together, and she'd grown stronger during that time than she ever had before. When was it? I wonder. At what point during our time together did I come to realize these feelings for him? Shizuka placed a hand against her chest as warmth engulfed her. This warmth was something that she'd only begun feeling again after meeting Naruto, and it was something she cherished greatly. Why are you telling me this? Tenten asked after a long silence. Because you also love Naruto, Shizuka said. Tenten somehow managed to both blush and break into a cold sweat. Don't try to deny it. Naruto might have been too preoccupied to notice you spying on us, but I saw you hiding behind the door. I. Tenten opened and closed her mouth several times, trying and failing to speak. Giving up, she looked away from Shizuka, who could only smile. I understand what you are feeling. Naruto has many lovers. Tenten twitched. Noticing this, Shizuka smiled and placed her hands behind her back. When I first confessed my feelings to him, Naruto informed me that he could never give me what I wanted. He said he couldn't produce children, couldn't get married, couldn't grow old with me, she sighed. There were a lot of things he said he couldn't do for me. He also told me there were other women in his life. By this point, Tenten had finally turned around and was facing her. Shizuka's story had her full attention now. Curiosity was swimming within the weapon user's brown eyes. If he can't give you any of those things, why are you with him? Because even if he can't give me children, marriage, and a life where we grow old together, he has given me something that no one else has. Shizuka smiled at Tenten. His undying and unwavering support and love. It's true he can't grow old with me or have children. Marriage is also out of the question because I'll eventually die while he won't. Even though he knows this, knows it will hurt him, he has promised to love and cherish me until the day my time on this earth is over. A soft breeze blew across the defensive wall, causing her hair to rustle. Shizuka could feel Tenten's eyes on her as she patted imaginary dust off her knees, but she pretended not to notice the intensity in the other woman's eyes. Anyway, that's what I wanted to tell you, Shizuka said. I'm pretty sure I know what your problem is, and if you decide that what Naruto has to offer isn't what you want, then that's fine. But I don't think you should be angry at Naruto because he can't be what you want him to be. If you dislike the idea of not being in a loving marriage, just find someone else. With her words spoken, Shizuka began walking away, seeing no more point in remaining on that wall. She had more work to do. Leaving all of it to her aides would be irresponsible of her. She looked at Tenten one last time as the girl turned back to look at the mountains way off in the distance, and then she left. Zox, this is it, Tokiwa said as they finally reached the mine that would supposedly lead them to Nami no Kuni. It had taken less than an hour to leap through the trees to reach this place. Naruto was grateful the trees in this forest were so sturdy. They'd blasted from branch to branch at a hellacious pace. The mine didn't look like much, but then, he guessed most mines didn't. Embedded into the mountain range, it appeared like nothing more than a doorway without a door. Worn-out wooden pillars were being used to support the entrance. It didn't look very sturdy. Naruto couldn't stop a small pit of worry from entering his stomach, the thought of traveling through here only to have the supports break and the ceiling collapse entering his mind. And you're sure it leads all the way to Nami no Kuni? Asked Kuji, the expression on his face dubious. The big guy obviously felt the same way Naruto did. He was staring at the mine like it was a monster's mouth. We're positive, Tokiwa affirmed with a nod. Technically, it leads to Hai no Kuni, but it is close to the bridge that connects Hai no Kuni with Nami no Kuni. I guess there's nothing to it, then. Naruto wanted to cry at the idea of going through this freaky-looking mine, but he sucked in his tears and tried to think about the positives. He would be able to see Inari and Old Man Tazuna again. That would be fun. What else was good? Oh. He'd be able to see what had happened to Nami no Kuni after he and Team 7 beat those slimes working for Gato. That was a good thing. Alright. Come on, Kuji. Are you sure it's safe? Nope. But let's go. Kuji was even more reluctant to go through the mines than he was, but he followed Naruto anyway. They said goodbye to Tokiwa, who informed them that she would tell Shizuka they had gone off before hopping back into the trees. He wished her a safe journey. The mine was dark. From the moment they entered and began walking down the sloped path, Naruto's eyesight was hampered by a complete lack of light. Fortunately, he had night vision, which allowed him to see despite this, but it took some getting used to. Ouch! Kuji was not so lucky. Careful. It looks like there's a railroad track here. I wish you would have told me that before I tripped. Sorry. Reaching into his pouch, Naruto took out 2 glow sticks, snapping them both to activate the glowing gel inside, and then handing one to Kuji. Thanks to the glow sticks, their surroundings were illuminated. Dark shadows danced along the cracked walls. Jagged points and sharp tips created bumpy outcroppings. Naruto could see where people had taken pickaxes to the walls long ago. Like the entrance, this tunnel was held up by wooden pillars that were worn and weathered with age. He was surprised they hadn't broken. Many of these pillars were rotted with age. This place is kinda creepy, isn't it? Asked Kuji. Naruto nodded. Yeah, though I'm mostly worried about the mine's structural integrity. I don't mind if it's a little creepy. The tunnel eventually opened into a large, cavernous space. Naruto narrowed his eyes as he used his enhanced vision to peer beyond the paltry 5 meters of light offered by their glow sticks. Outside of there being numerous passages they could travel through, not all of them were located on the ground. He looked up. Several natural land formations extended from one side of the room to the other, acting as bridge that people could cross. It looks like there are several different routes we can take, Naruto murmured. Really? Kuji asked. Yeah. Hang on. Sighing, Naruto lifted his hands and created several shadow clones. He had them pair up and travel down a passage. The groups all saluted with a loud asu, and darted off, disappearing through one of the darkened tunnels. He watched them go. They'll dispel once they reach the end, letting me know which of these routes we should take. Huh. Those shadow clones sure are useful, Kuji mumbled. Shadow clones are used primarily for reconnaissance. Naruto shrugged. I had no idea. A short silence descended upon them, but Naruto paid no heed as he thought about what their next move should be. Obviously, they would be heading to Nami no Kuni. However, that was only the first stage of what they needed to do. He would need to speak with Tezuna, find out who was in charge, and inform them that several kunoichi had been kidnapped and were likely being held captive there. This is going to cause an international incident. Naruto almost groaned at the thought. However, just before he could really let the political ramifications of all this sink in, 2 of his clones dispelled they were destroyed. Images filtered into his head. A horde of people charging down a tunnel. One of them was far larger than the rest. A massive man who towered over everyone else had slammed into his clones before they knew what hit them. That must have been Akuma. Kuji. It looks like we've got company coming. What? Really? Yeah, so let's get off the floor and find a place to hide. Follow me. Naruto rushed toward the nearest wall, channeling chakra to his feet as he ran up it, and then curved around toward one of the naturally formed bridges. Kuji followed him. They both lowered themselves into a crouch and peered over the edge. They had smothered their glow sticks, so his friend couldn't see anything, not at first, but then a light emerged from the end of a tunnel. Several dozen figures soon burst from the tunnel. Their clothing was not what he had expected. Black chest plates, shoulder pauldrons, greaves, and a black bodysuit covered each of them. An orb was embedded into the center of their chests. Chakra armor. These son of a bitches had chakra armor. Strapped to their sides were weapons. Swords. Knives. They were mostly standard weapons used by lowlifes, but Naruto noticed what Tenten had spotted last time. All their weapons were new. Their employer has some deep pockets. There were so many people down below that Naruto couldn't even count them all. He stopped after reaching 500, but more kept pouring in as the seconds ticked by. They filled a good portion of the room with light from their lamps. It looked like they were getting ready to attack Nadeshika no Sato en masse. Among the group, one of them stood out the most. He was huge. Massive didn't even begin to describe him. At a guess, Naruto would have said he was about 20 or 30 centimeters taller than Kisame. However, while Kisame had a thinner build, this man was a mountain of meat. His muscles were bulging and rippling, stretching his dark skin taut. Flaming red hair tied into a strange topknot that spiked out like crystallized fire. He didn't wear ninja clothes. His dark gi was tied with a brown belt, and he wore straw sandals instead of ninja sandals. More shocking than his hair was his eyes. Situated beneath a pair of thick brow ridges with no eyebrows were a pair of glaring red eyes. Naruto almost froze at the sight of them. Those eyes didn't look human. His comrades, a term Naruto used loosely, seemed to think so as well, for they kept a certain distance between them and the man, who could only be Akuma. Wasn't there supposed to be someone around here? One of the thugs asked in a shaky voice. I thought you said the one who created those clones was here. Never mind that, Akuma's cold voice sent chills down the spines of those around him. Keep moving. Alright. The bandits didn't hesitate to follow his orders, traveling through the tunnel that Naruto and Kuuji had just come from, obviously on their way to attack Nadeshika no Sato. Should we attack them? Asked Kuuji in a hushed whisper. Naruto thought about it but shook his head. There's too many, and I don't want to risk the mine caving in on us. We'll wait. While the bandits wouldn't be a problem, the real threat was Akuma. Naruto didn't know everything about his fighting style, but Shizuka had stated that the man's attacks were powerful and destructive, capable of demolishing buildings in a single blow. He didn't want to risk getting caught in a cave-in should they fight. As the last bandit left, Akuma walked almost casually over to the tunnel. He didn't walk through, though. Grinning, he looked around the cavern as though searching for him and Kuuji. I might not know where you are, but do not think I can't sense your presence. Kyuubi Jinchuriki. Naruto stiffened. Akuma chuckled. I can feel the presence of that malignant chakra inside of you, even if you're masking it well. Once I finish my mission in Nadeshika no Sato, you and I will have a bout, but until then, just stay here. What? Naruto had only a second to ponder Akuma's words before the man slammed his fist into the cavern wall. A massive crack split the wall, starting from his fist and growing wider by the second. Akuma sent one last grin into the room before disappearing down the tunnel. Naruto's eyes widened as he realized what was happening. Quick, Kuuji. Let's move. What? Right. Naruto dropped from the bridge and rushed toward the tunnel. The cracks had spread by now. They were all along the walls and ceiling. Several massive chunks of stone fell around them, but Naruto nimbly leapt left and right, zigzagging as he made his way toward the tunnel exit. Unfortunately, the tunnel collapsed completely. Rocks poured in from the tunnel as it caved. To make matters worse, the cavern around them was collapsing as well. Everything was shaking as the mountain itself seemed to crumble like a mudjutsu that ran out of chakra. If it wasn't for the chakra he was using to stick to the floor, he would have been knocked off his feet. Look out, Kuuji shouted as he stretched out his hand. Naruto looked at him, and then looked up just in time to see what must have been an entire mountain's worth of rubble descend upon him. Zox Tenten was still thinking about Shizuka's story several hours after its telling. She understood why that girl had told it to her. It was so she would understand where Naruto was coming from, but that was the problem. She did understand. For all her anger, she at least could say she understood Naruto's side of the issue. It's not like I don't want to forgive him, Tenten sighed. I'm just not sure what I want from him anymore. She wouldn't deny that her own desires had run along the lines of becoming Naruto's girlfriend, going on dates, and eventually getting married. Even though she knew it wouldn't happen after Naruto's transformation, that dream had still remained. That was why having it dashed so suddenly caused her to become angry at him. Because she didn't have anything to do at that moment, Tenten had been left to her thoughts as she patrolled the perimeter. The defensive wall went all the way around the hill. It encircled this section of the village to create an enclosure meant to protect them from attacks outside. She walked along, sandals thumping against the brick floor, not really paying attention to anything in particular. Tenten! A voice shouted from down below. Tenten stopped walking and turned as Ino raced up a flight of stairs, reached the top of the defensive wall, and grinned as she wandered up to her. Ino, Tenten greeted. Finished helping the medical ninjas? Yup. Ino kept smiling as she nodded. It was tough work. Turns out there were more injured than I thought. I ended up doing most of the work too because I can use medical ninjutsu, so it took a lot longer than I expected. I imagine it would. Ino had been helping heal the kunoichi and civilians of this village for the past week. Considering how much time had gone by, there must have been a lot more injured than either of them suspected. Tenten began walking again, and Ino followed her. A mild breeze caused the blue-eyed girl's blonde ponytail to get caught in the wind. Ino smiled as she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, as though enjoying the sunlight warming her face. She had been doing more work than anyone else on their team so far. She probably wanted to rest. Anyway, it's pretty crazy, huh? Ino began. What is? Asked Tenten. That Naruto and Shizuka are lovers. What else? Ino's eyes sparkled like a gossip's as she clasped her hands in front of her. I never would have thought that Naruto would get a girl like that, or a girl at all. I know how much stronger he's become, but I still can only think of him as that bratty kid from our days in the academy who kept obsessing over Sakura. Well, I guess even idiots can grow up. The topic this conversation was taking wasn't something Tenten wished to discuss, but at the same time, a thought occurred to her. She glanced at Ino. Biting her lip, She debated whether or not to ask the question that had suddenly appeared within her mind. Something up? Ino seemed to notice before she could decide and tilted her head. Tenten sighed. Mind if I ask something? Not at all. What's on your mind? Hypothetically speaking, let's say you were in love with Naruto, but then you found out that he already had several lovers and was intimate with them. What would you do? I'd beat the crap out of him, of course. Ino's shout came complete with her raising an angry fist into the air and shaking it. There's no way in hell I'd let the guy I like get away with something like that. Sleeping with other girl is off limits. And after you beat him up? What would you do once you cooled down? Well. Ino scratched her head and thought about her answer. I'd probably talk to him and see if I could convince him to leave the other girls. And if he didn't? Then I'd drop him. Ino shrugged. If the guy can't be satisfied with me, then I have no obligation to stay with him. Yeah. I guess that makes sense. Ino had a different philosophy from Shizuka, who didn't mind that Naruto was intimate with other girls. Tenten believed she was more in line with Ino on this matter. At the same time, she didn't want to give up Naruto even if he was with other girls. She didn't know if that meant she loved him that much, or if maybe she just couldn't bring herself to remove him from her life. Her thoughts and feelings were a confounded mixture trapped in the swirling maelstrom inside of her. She didn't know what to do. The problem was ultimately that Naruto, for everything he had done, was still the same as she remembered. Thinking on it, he'd always been the kind of guy who'd freely give his affection to anyone who asked for it. She knew why. Of course she did. Naruto was lonely. Having lived his entire life without anyone to look after him, care for him, and love him, he craved the love and affection of others. However, because he was immortal, he could not have a normal relationship. If he got married and started a family, his wife and kids would die and leave him alone again. Of course, he said he couldn't have kids, so at least one of those points was moot anyway. In either event, Naruto didn't want that to happen, but he still wanted to form intimate bonds. That was why he formed relationships with Shizuka and Temari. What kind of relationship do I want with him? Tenten didn't know, and the more she thought about it, the more it bugged her. So. Ino began, interrupting her thoughts. I'm guessing you love Naruto? That's why you're asking me about this, right? Tenten could feel her cheeks heating up like a furnace, pretty much letting Ino know that she'd hit the kunai on the hilt. The blonde girl grinned at getting it right. Meanwhile, Tenten tried to figure out what she should say. Well, yes. Her shoulders slumped, though the blush remained. I thought so. Nodding to herself, Ino wandered over to the wall and looked at the expansive forest spread out before them. It was pretty obvious you liked him. You and Yugito. I always wondered which one of you would end up with him. I'm surprised Shizuka ended getting to him before you two. Tenten grimaced. This girl didn't even know the half of it. She thought about telling Ino that Naruto was also sleeping with Temari as well, but something held her back, perhaps the knowledge that it wasn't her place to tell the other kunoichi about who else Naruto was sleeping with. Anyway, Ino continued as she stretched her arms above her head. Shouldn't you be thinking more about what you want to do instead of wondering about what other people want? Do you think so? Asked Tenten. Of course I think so. Ino looked at her like Tenten's question was stupid. I'm just one girl with my own opinions. I know plenty of people who don't mind being in a polyamorous relationship. But if you want something like that, you should definitely talk it out with Naruto and Shizuka. I've heard communication among partners is really important in a relationship like that. Tenten would have wondered how Ino knew so much about polyamory when she herself was monogamous, but then she remembered that Ino was a gossip, and the juicier the gossip was, the more likely she was to know about it. Ninja engaging in polyamory was definitely the juiciest of gossip someone like her could find. As she was thinking about everything she'd been told, a loud quaking made the wall shake. Ino screamed as she almost lost her balance. Tenten applied chakra to her feet, sticking in place. As the shaking subsided, she studied the area around her to see if she could find the source of that quaking. It wasn't hard. Bandit raid. We're under attack. Everyone. Defensive positions. Several small spheres sailed through the air and struck a building, detonating with explosive force. Plumes of fire and smoke rose into the air. Rubble rained onto the streets below. A threnody of screams rent the air, but fortunately, none of them were from the civilians, who had remained behind in the largest and safest of the three fortress sections. From where she stood, Tenten could see numerous kunoichi pouring from the village's center hill. More explosions echoed all around them. Smoke and flames appeared high over their heads as several sections of the village began burning. The Nadeshiko kunoichi darted across the roofs and between buildings as they rushed to defend their village. It looks like the bandits have returned, Ino said with a grimace. They worked faster than I thought they would. I didn't expect them for another few days. Whatever the case may be, let's help out. I'm with you. Ino leapt down from the wall and headed toward the nearest village entrance. There were only 4 entrances into the village, 2 on each of the smaller hills. These underground stairways were how the kunoichi of Nadeshiko no Sato left the village. Each stairway was reinforced with a door made of thick steel. However, it seemed the bandits had some manner of breaking through, for dozens of them were being disgorged from the entrance they went to. A chaotic battle was already taking place at the village entrance. Kunoichi clashed with bandits. In most cases, the bandits would have been easily pushed back, for there was no way simple thugs and criminals could contest with the jutsu and strength of ninja. Something was different. The kunoichi were being pushed back. A kunoichi on Tenten's left launched a fireball from her mouth, which struck the ground in front of several bandits and exploded. While the air pressure created from the explosion certainly knocked them down, none of them appeared injured, and they got back up and charged forward again. To the right, a young man engaged a kunoichi in a taijutsu battle. The kunoichi had lightning coating her hands as she launched a series of powerful punches, but when her hand connected with the man, the lightning dissipated. Before the shocked kunoichi could even figure out what was happening, the bandit knocked her unconscious with a strike to the head. "What is going on?" asked Ino with a surprised shriek. "I don't know, but something is definitely different than the last attack." Tenten looked at the bandits once more and noticed something. "I think their armor somehow absorbs chakra." "What? Really? Take a look." Whenever a jutsu hit one of the armored bandits, the jutsu would dissipate. What's more, streamers of chakra swirled inward like a vortex, getting sucked into a bright jewel that glowed as the chakra entered it. Tenten had never seen anything like it before, but it wasn't hard to figure out. "Everyone," she shouted. "Don't attack using jutsu. They won't work. Stick with taijutsu." There was no telling how many kunoichi heard her words, but a few of them definitely did, for they stopped attacking with ninjutsu and began using purely taijutsu. The difference was unbelievable. Once the kunoichi attacked with simple hand-to-hand combat, the tide of battle began turning in their favor. Of course, several kunoichi were ninjutsu specialists and had no taijutsu skills. The bandits quickly dispatched them, knocking them unconscious and attempting to drag them off, but Tenten leapt through the air, unrolled 2 ninja scrolls, and went through a series of hand seals. Sashoryu. After completing the necessary hand seals, the scrolls rose up from the ground and spun around each other. Smoke emitted from between them. It took the shape of a dragon. Tenten used the smoke as cover and leapt into the air, summoning several hundred kunai, which she unleashed in blindingly quick succession. No one could even see the kunai as she threw them. They were mere glimmers of light that traveled faster than even a skilled ninja could spot. The bandits might have been wearing special armor that gave them an edge, but they were still lowlifes. Her aim was impeccable, too. Blood spurted from numerous wounds as she tossed kunai at the joints in their armor. The neck, the shoulder, the thigh, armpits. She aimed at the bandits trying to carry away the unconscious kunoichi, striking them down before they could. A great cheer went up at Tenten's display of skill. However, even with her technique dispatching numerous foes, more were still coming. In fact, Tenten soon realized that there were more bandits now than there had been before. It was like 10 more cropped up for every one bandit killed. If this kept up, they would be quickly overrun. This is not good. Tenten summoned another weapon to her hand, a length of chain with a weight attached to one end. The chain was exactly half a meter long. Known as a kusari fundo, it was a weapon that gave her an extended reach while also allowing her to defeat opponents up close. Spinning the weight around to create an intense propeller effect, Tenten launched herself into the battle with a war cry. Zox. Thanks to the cave-in, Naruto and Kuji had been forced to sit on the ground and think of a way to break through. A glance around revealed nothing. The ceiling had collapsed on top of them, leaving only this tiny space about 6 or 7 meters wide and only 3 high. Chunks of rubble came together, forming an irregularly shaped dome around them. Their lives had been saved thanks to Kuji. He had used his expansion jutsu to increase his size and safeguard them from the falling rubble. Naruto was impressed with how well his friend could control his jutsu now. Of course, right now he didn't have the time to admire his friend's newfound power. "Unfortunately, I don't know any earth jutsu that can get us out of here," Kuji said when Naruto asked him if he might know a jutsu that would let them dig their way out. He sighed. "I guess not. I have a few jutsu that could potentially break us out of here, but all of them are destructive. If I used one here, it might cause this place to collapse around our ears." Naruto sat cross-legged, his arms crossed and his whiskers stretching across his face as he frowned. He looked at the walls again. The way they were packed together meant that removing one would cause the others to fall. In which case, their only means of getting out would be to either dig underground, or destroy the entire mountain. I don't have any jutsu that will let me dig underground. Even if I did, that would take too long. With a sigh, Naruto stood up and dusted off his pants and coat. He gazed up and began walking, until he found the approximate center of this space, and then he stopped. "Kuji," he said. His friend looked up at him. "Yes? You might want to get close. I'd hate for you to be caught in the blast." Kuji clearly didn't understand what Naruto meant, but he wandered over and plopped himself on the ground again. Naruto nodded, then focused his chakra into his left hand, creating a small swirling ball of energy. The Rasengan. Concentrating, Naruto changed the chakra nature of his Rasengan from non-elemental to the wind element. He bit his lip and compressed the wind nature chakra into the Rasengan, which caused the entire orb to turn white. A small trickle of sweat poured down his brow. He lifted his hand above his head and poured more chakra into his technique. The Rasengan, now pure white, began emitting a loud shrieking sound as several wind blades swirled around it, making the jutsu look like a massive four-pointed shuriken. That's a lot of chakra," Kuji mumbled as sweat poured from his brow. Even someone who wasn't good at sensing chakra would be able to tell that a lot of power was packed into this tiny sphere. Yup. Naruto didn't peel his eyes off the ceiling. "I need a lot of chakra for what I'm about to do. This technique is our ticket out of here. Are you sure it's safe?" "Nope." His words caused Kuji to choke back whatever he'd been going to say, face going whiter than a sheet. The boy mumbled something under his breath. Perhaps it was a prayer. He didn't think Kuji was the type to pray, but when your life is on the line and your friend was about to do something admittedly stupid, anyone would become temporarily religious. Taking a deep breath, Naruto bent his knees, counted down to 3, and then launched himself into the air. Futon, Rasen Shuriken. The massive screech akin to a bell became accompanied by the rumbling of rocks being torn to shreds. Naruto didn't even meet with any resistance as his jutsu plunged into the rock. The 4 points of his technique sliced away everything in front of it like the rubble was made of paper. Up, up, up he went, traveling higher and higher as he pushed wind chakra into his feet, propelling him forward at an accelerated rate. Before Naruto knew it, he was floating high above the collapsed mountain. From the outside, it looked like the massive mountain had caved inward, evident by how it was the only mountain no longer standing while the rest of the range remained intact. Seeing the mountain with a bird's eye view allowed Naruto to notice how the top had fallen in, while the sides of the mountain had been pushed out, creating what almost looked like a crater. Naruto let his technique dissipate now that he had no use for it. Landing on the edge of the hole, he peered down and found Kuji looking out of the hole with bulging eyes and a gawking expression. "Kuji," he called down. "Think you can climb up?" Yeah. Jay, just give me a moment." Kuji scrambled to his feet and leapt into the hole. Naruto's attack had created a hole wide enough that Kuji could stand on the wall using chakra without having to stoop over. He raced up the tunnel and burst out of the hole, landing on his feet next to Naruto. "The attack on Nadeshika no Sato has probably already started," Naruto said to Kuji. "Let's go." Leaping away from the hole, Naruto raced down the collapsed mountain with Kuji at his side. He looked toward Nadeshika no Sato, barely visible in the distance, and narrowed his eyes. "Hold on just a little longer. I'm coming." Zox, her people were outnumbered 10-1. No, it was even more than that. For every one person they defeated, 10 or 15 more appeared to take their place. What's more, they were wearing that annoying armor that protected them from her jutsu. Wind splashed harmlessly against a shield that appeared before them, absorbing the chakra and using it to further fuel the shield. Shizuka had heard of it before. That was Yuki no Kun's famed chakra armor, but what was it doing here? Since she couldn't rely on her wind jutsu, Shizuka stuck with taijutsu. She used a powerful combination of hand-to-hand combat and thrown projectiles to defeat the bandits who came her way. A sickening crunch echoed around her as she snapped one bandit's neck. She tossed a kunai into the throat of area around her was already littered with the dead bodies of foes slain by her hands. Yet even with so many killed, more enemies kept coming, crawling over their deceased comrades to meet her in combat. Do these people have a death wish? Shizuka wondered as she floated around a thrust sword, then jabbed the tendons in the man's arm. As the now nerveless fingers dropped the sword, Shizuka scooped the weapon into her hands, twirled it around, and sliced her opponent's head clean off. As both body and head hit the ground with 2 thumps, Shizuka took a second to look around. The fighting was intense no matter where she looked, with her people battling against an overwhelming number of opponents. A kunoichi fought against 6 bandits in chakra armor on the roof. She was being overpowered. Another was trying to attack with a fire jutsu, but the technique merely splashed against a shield before it was absorbed by the armor. While she was stunned, several bandits came up behind her and knocked the girl out cold with a powerful strike to the head. There's too many of them. This was easily the largest assault on her village yet. The first one had been just Akuma, and it had seemed more like a probe, like he was testing their defenses and strength. After that had been the first assault with a large group of bandits, and then the third assault just last week. However, those second and third assaults were nothing compared to this one. It was like her home was being attacked by an army instead of a ragtag group of bandits. She didn't understand how there could even be this many attackers. Also, what happened to Naruto and Kuuji? They should have been traveling to Nami no Kuni, the location they had determined was the hideout for this group. Had they run into this massive army and been killed? Impossible. Naruto was the strongest person she knew. There was no way he could be killed. But if he hadn't been killed, what had happened to him? Shizuka was left with no time to ponder these thoughts. An explosion to her left made every thought flee from her mind as she turned her head. The wall to a building crumbled as something broke through it, traveling in an almost straight line through the air, before its angle tilted, struck the ground, and rolled across the surface like a rag doll. Shizuka gasped. What had come out of the wall wasn't an object. It was a person. Tokiwa. Rushing toward her attendant's side, Shizuka knelt next to the woman, who wasn't moving so much as an inch. Her body was littered with wounds. The mesh armor she wore was torn, her bodysuit was destroyed, and what flesh could be seen poking through the ripped fabric was black and purple. Shizuka trembled at the sight. A low bass rumble emerged from the smoke that had been kicked up by the demolished building. Shizuka shifted her gaze as Akuma walked toward them. She was a lot weaker than I remember being, or maybe it's because she was fighting me on her own this time. How disappointing. I was expecting a better challenge, but I guess that was asking for too much. You. Shizuka stood up and stepped in front of the unconscious Tokiwa, setting herself between her defeated attendant and this monstrous man. Akuma gazed at her with a blank stare. His red eyes were just as frightening now as she remembered them being. There were no emotions within those eyes, just a pure, unbridled desire to fight and kill. This person couldn't even be called a human. Those were the eyes of a demon. You're the one who fought me with that woman. Akuma narrowed his eyes. Yes, I remember now. You inflicted damage on me with that strange technique of yours, while the other one distracted me. He shifted his stance, sliding his feet apart, lowering his center of gravity, and bringing his hands into a combat-ready position. Will you put up a better fight than that one? Shizuka narrowed her eyes as she slid her feet along the ground. Every fiber in her body was screaming at her not to get close to this man. But she ignored it. As the strongest ninja in the village, she couldn't run from this fight. Summoning numerous kunai to her hands, Shizuka tossed them at Akuma with pinpoint accuracy. She aimed each kunai at his vital points. Neck. Carotid artery. Heart. Liver. Lungs. Akuma didn't even bother to evade. Shizuka gawked when her kunai struck Akuma's body and bounced off, clattering to the ground. His skin didn't even have a scratch from where her kunai struck. It was like his body was made of metal or stone. She remembered Akuma having a sturdy body from the previous battle. He had brushed aside many of her attacks with ease. Even so, she had not expected his skin to be so tough that kunai bounced right off. I hope that is not the extent of your power. Akuma growled. Fight me for real. Give me a challenge, or I will kill you. Shizuka felt a jolt of fear race down her spine, but she shoved it aside and burst forward in a sprint. Covering her hand in wind-natured chakra, she launched a power punch at Akuma, who finally saw fit to move, leaping to the left. A powerful shockwave was released from her fist. The ground around her broke apart, fissures spreading across the ground quickly. That is better, but it's still not enough, Akuma growled as he lowered his body and brought his arms toward his torso. A massive surge of chakra emitted from between his palms. Shizuka only had a second to realize the danger she was in. Gohoken. Leaping into the air, Shizuka barely avoided the massive blast of pure chakra that emerged from Akuma's palms. She could only gawk as the purplish chakra slammed into a building several meters away, exploding in a massive gout of energy that caused the entire thing to break apart. She was given no time to recover from her surprise. As she fell to the ground, Akuma met her, leaping into the air and extending his leg as he spun around. The leg caught fire. That was what it looked like at first, but Shizuka realized that it was actually another pure chakra technique. Tatsumaki Zankuyaku. A rushed series of hand seals was what saved Shizuka from having her ribs crushed by the powerful attack. Akuma's foot seemed to strike her body, but then she disappeared in a burst of smoke and a chunk of sediment took her place. The piece of debris blew apart underneath the powerful kick. Shizuka appeared behind Akuma, near the building that he and Tokiwa had come through. Sunshine. Using the body flicker technique, Shizuka appeared directly above Akuma. As she descended, she covered her leg in vast amounts of chakra, enough that her legs started glowing light green. Take this! Nadeshiko Ryuko Senkaijuri. With her leg covered in wind chakra, her cutting power was maximized. She used the power of wind nature chakra and gravity to land a solid falling kick that struck Akuma on his left shoulder. The dark-skinned man's knees buckled as the ground beneath him cratered. However, while abrasions spread quickly along the ground, Akuma himself remained unharmed. Weak. With a growl, Akuma unleashed another one of those Gohyoken techniques, and this time, Shizuka had no room to dodge. She crossed her arms as the attack slammed into her, but that did little. A pain cry escaped her as she was blasted into the air. The world around her became white as pain flared in every nerve of her body. Ashura Senku. Akuma appeared directly above her, suddenly and unexpectedly. The man flipped around and extended his left foot in a powerful dropkick that connected with Shizuka's chest. Crack. The feeling of her ribs breaking would have made her cry out, but she couldn't even do that much as her body was sent to the ground. Her mind numbed with pain, Shizuka's consciousness faded in and out before the world leapt back into startling focus. She groaned and coughed, unable to do much else. Blood welled up in her lungs and dribbled down her mouth. She must have punctured a lung. Step step. Step step. A figure swam into her line of sight, his dark skin, flame-like hair, and glaring red eyes making Shizuka's soul quake. Akuma reached out. His fingers clasped around her throat hard enough that she gagged. He lifted her out of the crater that her body had made as she used what strength she had left to grab his thick wrist. That was all she could do, however. She barely had enough strength to do even that much. Pathetic, Akuma growled. When you hurt me that first time, I had believed you were strong, but it looks like that had been a fluke. Without that other woman, you're nothing but a weak insect. The man paused long enough for his lips to curl in disgust. You are quite lucky I was hired to capture you, Kunoichi. I normally kill weaklings like you, but you'll get to live. HKK. Herk, Shizuka gasped and gurgled as Akuma's iron fingers tightened around her throat. Loud cracking sounds echoed around them. It felt like her throat was slowly being crushed. She tried to pry his fingers off, but she lacked the strength. What's more, her mind was slowly going dark from oxygen deprivation. Even as she continued to struggle, her body was becoming sluggish, and it wasn't long before her arms were dangling limply at her side as drool slowly leaked from her mouth. Humph. Pathetic. Shizuka could feel her consciousness slipping, but she was still awake enough to hear his words. Tears slowly gathered in her eyes. She thought she had grown more powerful, that she had become stronger, but it was obvious to her now that the strength she had gained was paltry compared to some of the monsters out there. Her confidence in herself had been naive. I can't believe I was defeated so easily. I'm sorry, Naruto. It looks like I wasn't strong enough. The image of the blonde-haired, blue-eyed man entered her mind. Shizuka felt something inside of her ignite. Naruto was strong. She had trained alongside him for several months, witnessed his strength, and tried to emulate it. Shizuka remembered wanting that strength. To that end, she had practiced several new techniques, though none of them had been put to good use. Most of them weren't even finished. However, Shizuka gathered what little strength remained in her limbs. Her arms ached, but she pushed her body to its limit, raised her hands, and grabbed Akuma's wrist again. Keikazikiri. Shizuka choked out the name of her technique. Instantly, a powerful cutting wind sliced into Akuma's wrist. The man howled in surprise and pain as Shizuka fell to the ground. Akuma's hand was still wrapped around her throat, but she pried it off and began choking and gasping for her. Meanwhile, her opponent raised his arm and gazed at the stump where his hand had been. His eyes were wide with shock. It didn't last long, though, as a grin soon split his lips. An admirable job. It seems you do have some strength. He looked down at his hand, lying on the ground in front of Shizuka, who glared up at him as she gasped for air. I had not expected to find someone capable of cutting through my skin. I can only guess that you poured all of your chakra into that jutsu. You probably did the same last time when you broke my ribs. However, you're all out of chakra now, aren't you? Shizuka didn't want to admit that he was right, but even as she glared at Akuma, she knew he had seen through her. She'd used almost all of her chakra in that technique. She barely had enough to keep her body functioning. Akuma nodded. I thought so. You no longer have the chakra to fight me. That's too bad. I see potential in you. I'm tempted to let you go so you can train that potential and fight me again. But I have orders this time. Gnashing her teeth together, Shizuka struggled to stand up. Her limbs trembled. Her body shook. However, no matter how hard she pushed herself, she couldn't rise to her feet. Having already pushed her body beyond its natural limits, she no longer had any strength left. Damn it! Frustration boiled inside of her. Damn it! Was this all she could do? Damn it! Why was she so weak? As her self-loathing at her own inability to stand up consumed her, Akuma walked over, no doubt to knock her unconscious and take her back with the other captured kunoichi. She hated it. She hated that she couldn't do anything, that she would be letting this man capture her. Shizuka wanted to be strong enough that this kind of thing couldn't happen. If only I had trained harder. Regret. A wellspring of negative emotions and what if swelled up inside of her. If only she had done something a little different. If only she had trained a little harder. If only she had perfected the technique Naruto taught her. If only, if only, if only. You put up a good fight, Akuma said as he stopped in front of her. But now it's time to end this. Shizuka looked up as the man pulled back his fist. She tried to glare at him, but her vision was still fading. Even if he did nothing, she didn't think her consciousness would last much longer. You're right. It is time to end this. Just as her hope waned, a voice spoke up. Shizuka blinked as something orange suddenly appeared in front of her. She blinked again when she realized that what had appeared was a person, Naruto, who gave her a quick grin. Sorry I'm late, but you know. The hero always arrives at the last second, he told her, and then he spun around and delivered a crushing blow to Akuma's jaw. Senpuken. Akuma was lifted into the air by the powerful uppercut. This wasn't enough to defeat him, though. He spun around and landed on his feet several meters away, his jaw now bruised. Spitting out blood, Akuma stared at Naruto and grinned. So you escaped from the collapsed mountain? I planned on fighting you after I accomplished my mission, but this works too. Sorry, but I'm not the one who's going to be fighting you. Ignoring the dark-skinned devil, Naruto turned his head to gaze at Shizuka. His eyes were full of concern. You alright, Shizu? Naruto. She tried to say she was okay, but that was when her strength finally failed her. Like a puppet without its strings, she fell forward, but Naruto quickly moved before she could hit the ground and caught her. Warmth engulfed her body. She vaguely recognized it, this feeling of warmth, as Naruto's arms wrapping around her. Shizuka took a deep breath. You're covered in sweat and dust, she murmured. Sorry. I had a mountain collapse on me and had to blast my way out, Naruto said. There was a rustling sound before something soft was pressed against her lips. It's a soldier pill. Can you eat it? Maybe. Despite expressing her reluctance, Shizuka opened her mouth and let Naruto push it inside. She closed her mouth and chewed. Then she swallowed. While the effects weren't immediate, it didn't take long for her fatigue to ebb and strength to return. She understood. The soldier pill was granting her a temporary boost in power by restoring her chakra. However, it was only temporary. She'd probably pass out once the pill ran its course. Hey, Shizuka, Naruto began as he stared at Akuma, who wasn't moving from his spot. Perhaps it was his sense of honor, or maybe he just didn't want to ruin a good fight with a sneak attack. Do you remember the technique I taught you? I do, Shizuka mumbled as she slowly climbed to her feet. Can you do it? Only sometimes. It requires a lot of chakra, so it usually fizzles out after a while, she admitted. Naruto nodded. That pill should have temporarily restored all of your chakra. I want you to use the technique and hit Akuma with everything you have. Oh okay. Shizuka honestly didn't know if she could do it, but Naruto spoke with so much confidence in her that she couldn't help but decide to try. He was trusting her. Beyond that, he was giving her a chance to protect her village and fellow kunoichi by being the person who delivered the finishing blow to this man. Naruto grinned before his lips fell into a frown and he glared at Akuma. Hey, Akuma. If you can withstand Shizuka's next attack, I'll give you the battle you're craving so much. Akuma crossed his arms and frowned. That so? Then I'll gladly take her attack head on. It's all on you, Naruto said. Give him hell. Shizuka didn't want to waste what strength she had left, so she settled on a nod. Stepping past Naruto, she first began to walk toward Akuma, but then she soon picked up into a jog. Taking the replenished chakra, she directed it all toward her hand and forced it to begin spinning in multiple directions. While the orb that appeared in her hand was a bit smaller than Naruto's, the unmistakable form of a Rasengan soon appeared. Despite seeing the clear threat, Akuma did not move from his spot. He spread his feet apart, bent his knees, and tucked his elbows into his torso as the muscles in his stomach hardened. This idiot was really intending to take her attack head-on. Shizuka wasn't going to complain. Rasengan. Thrusting out her hand, Shizuka slammed her jutsu into Akuma's chest. Her attack hit dead center. Akuma gritted his teeth as his feet slid across the ground. He tried to stop himself from moving, but that only caused Shizuka's attack to drill into his body even more. She could see it. Her attack was grinding away his chest, peeling apart the skin and shredding his muscles. Blood splashed against her face as this idiotic man who only concerned himself with fighting strong opponents had his chest torn open until, finally, his strength failed him and his body began losing more ground. Ha! With a shout of her own, Shizuka sent the last remaining chakra she had into the Rasengan. A bright flash foretold the danger. Shizuka gave one more push, then her jutsu exploded with a torrent of powerful chakra. Akuma screamed as he was sent flying backward. His body disappeared as he crashed into a building, which toppled several seconds. Shizuka stared at the ruined building, forcing her body to remain upright as seconds ticked by, but that last jutsu had used up all of her strength. She had nothing left, and so her body fell backward only to be caught by Naruto, who scooped her into his arms like she was a princess. "You did it," Naruto said with a grin. I did." Shizuka smiled. "I really defeated him." "You were amazing," Naruto complimented. Shizuka was too tired to blush. "Thank you." "Hey, Naruto?" "Yeah? I'm tired," Naruto chuckled. "Get some sleep. My clones, team, and your fellow kunoichi are mopping up what's left of the bandits." K. What little strength she had left disappeared as Shizuka closed her eyes and fell asleep in Naruto's arms. Zox. Many of the bandits lost their will to fight immediately after the defeat of Akuma. After handing Shizuka off to one of his clones, who fled into the inner sanctuary, Naruto had taken Akuma's corpse and dragged it through the village, announcing that Akuma had been defeated, that they should give up, and that any bandit who laid down their arms would be spared. Very few actually laid down their arms, but many tried to flee. Naruto wouldn't let them. He took Tenten, Kuji, Ino, and a squad of still-functioning Nadeshiko kunoichi and routed the bandits. It had been less of a fight and more of a wholesale slaughter. By the time they were done, not a single bandit had escaped. The cleanup had begun after their victory. Even if the victory was theirs, this was no time to rest on their laurels. Naruto created a couple hundred clones to take the bandit corpses out of Nadeshiko no Sato and cremate them. Meanwhile, Kuji, Tenten, and Ino helped move and heal the wounded. Shizuka slept for the entire day due to a combination of her injuries and chakra exhaustion, which only happened because she'd poured basically all of her chakra into that last Rasengan. The soldier pill probably hadn't helped. Those tended to have an inverse effect and were only supposed to be used during emergencies. In all honesty, Naruto should have taken care of the problem himself, but he had wanted Shizuka to use her own strength to claim victory instead of relying on him. A day passed. Shizuka awoke the next morning, and though she wasn't at 100%, the woman had called Naruto and his squad in for a meeting. They sat around the same table as before. Covered in several bandages that wrapped around her head, arms, legs, chest, and stomach, Shizuka gazed at each person in turn before offering them a deep bow. "Thank you very much for helping us as you have," she said. "This situation would have been much worse had you not come when you did." "Don't mention it," Kuji said. "We were more than happy to help." "Kuji is right," Ino added with a bright grin. "I can't stand the thought of something like this happening and not being able to do anything. Besides, this was a mission. It's only natural we do everything we can." Tenten added that last aside. Naruto was surprised she'd spoken at all. She'd been in a contemplative state ever since the battle ended. The few times he caught sight of her, she'd been staring off into space. "I still appreciate all of your help," Shizuka said. "We are a proud village of ninja. It is slightly shameful that we even needed help at all, but I am glad I was able to put aside my own pride and request your assistance." Naruto was sitting to Shizuka's left along with Kuji, while Ino and Tenten sat on the opposite side of the table. They had already eaten breakfast. At the moment, they were discussing the matter at hand. The situation still hasn't been resolved yet. Naruto decided to put a rein on their parade. While we were able to beat them back, there is still the issue of the kunoichi they managed to kidnap. Considering the current situation, it would be best to locate and launch an assault on their slave operations while we still have the element of surprise. They don't know their group has been crushed yet, but we only have a small window of opportunity to act. It took a week to reach Nami no Kuni using the mine. That meant they had 1 week to act. Whoever was in charge of this slave trading operation would eventually begin to suspect that Akuma and the others had been defeated once the week was up. If they didn't locate and dismantle this operation soon, then the person in charge would pack their bags and change locations. It wasn't unusual for slave traders to have several bases. You are correct, Shizuka admitted. However, from what you've told me, the underground passage leading to Nami no Kuni has been destroyed. How are we going to pass through? The fact that Akuma made the mine collapse is proof that there is probably another passage somewhere. If we can find it, then we can use it instead. Barring that, I have a few jutsu I can use to fly over the mountain. However, that comes with a problem, which is, I can't take anyone with me. Shrugging, Naruto explained the basic concept for one of his jutsu, which allowed him to propel his body through the air using wind-nature chakra. It was a powerful technique that drained chakra reserves faster than launching repeated Rasen Shuriken. Naruto, with his inhumanly monstrous reserves and powerful wind affinity, was probably the only person alive who could use this technique for long-distance travel. That is a problem, Shizuka murmured. They discussed the matter a bit more, and it was eventually decided that Naruto would fly over the mountains and land in Nami no Kuni first. While he gathered intelligence and tried to ascertain the location of the slavers, Kuji, Ino, Tenten, and a squad of Nadeshiko Kunoichi led by Shizuka would search for another passage that led to Nami no Kuni. Once you locate the slavers, watch them, Shizuka said. If it looks like they are planning to leave and we aren't there, you are free to bust up the slave trading ring yourself. However, I would like to ask that you wait until the last possible moment before acting on your own. I understand, Naruto agreed with her proposal. After their plan had been made, the group split up. Naruto left Nadeshiko no Sato, using his Hiko no Jutsu, flying jutsu, to traverse the skies. It was a technique that relied on sending wind chakra to his feet, propelling him through the air, while also expelling more wind-nature chakra from his chest, thighs, and shoulders to keep him aloft. Jiraiya had once said his technique was geniusly insane, and that only a chakra monster like him could pull it off. With the wind in his face, Naruto quickly passed over the mountain range that separated Uda no Kuni from Hai no Kuni. It didn't take him long to reach the bridge that led to Nami no Kuni. When he reached the massive bridge that extended from the mainland to the island nation of Nami no Kuni, he could not help but gawk for a moment. The Great Naruto Bridge? Naruto stared at the name written on a plaque high above his head. It was situated on a massive torii gate. Large support pillars stood in 2 rows, one on either side of the bridge. It was different from most torii gates that Naruto knew of. Aside from the simple fact that it was marking the entrance of a bridge and not a shrine, the kasagi that the pillars were supporting was a massive, triangular structure made of stone. I can't believe they named the freaking bridge after me. A grin caused Naruto's lips to split as he stared at the plaque with the bridge name on it. How cool was it that someone had named a bridge after him? This was almost as cool as being named Hokage. Still grinning, he walked underneath the torii and onto the bridge. Seeing how it connected the mainland to an island, the bridge was suitably long and took almost 20 minutes of walking to cross. There were a surprising amount of people on it as well. Some looked like they were just enjoying a stroll across the bridge, but he saw others who had set up fishing spots and were just sitting on the ledge, a fishing pole in hand as their legs dangled over the side. The village on the other side of the bridge was vastly different from the one he remembered. It still wasn't a huge village by any means, but it had certainly expanded since the last time he'd been there. Naruto looked at the now clean roads that were lined with cheerful stalls and numerous shops. No longer filled with destitute villagers doing everything they could to eke out a living, it was now filled with smiling citizens wandering the streets. Even the buildings themselves looked far better than they had the last time, no longer a patchwork of mismatched wooden panels and rusted tin roofing. Many of them now looked like proper buildings. A few were small, but he could also see some that were 2 and even 3 stories. A large tower sat on the main river, through which several boats traveled. That had not been around last time either. Naruto was not really sure where to begin his search. Since he didn't know who he should talk to, he decided first to speak with Tazuna. Unfortunately, the old bridge builder and his family appeared to have moved. They used to live on one of the riverbeds, their house located on a dock situated near a lake. Naruto had to ask around to discover that Tazuna and his family were now living in a larger house located within the city. He got directions from someone who recognized him, a villager who'd been present when Team 7 returned home after the bridge was complete. It didn't take him long to find the house. Wow. Whistling, Naruto looked at the 2-story home that appeared quite a bit nicer than the one he remembered. It looked brand new. The roof was a lovely shade of red, and the off-white walls seemed somehow sturdier than the ones from the old house. A garden sat out front. There was no fence, but Tazuna probably felt they didn't need one. Walking up to the front door, Naruto knocked several times and waited. "Be right there," a female voice called out. The sound of thumping feet followed, growing louder before they stopped in front of the door, which opened several seconds later to reveal a beautiful middle-aged woman with dark blue hair. "Yes, who is Naruto? Is that you?" "Heya, Tsunami." Naruto grinned. "How ya doing?" Naruto wasn't sure what he expected when he randomly appeared at this house, but the woman dragging him into a hug was not it. He was so shocked that he actually couldn't hug back. "It's good to see you," Tsunami said with a bright smile. "Come on in. I'll make you some snacks." "Oh. Thank you." While Naruto could have declined, he had no real reason to, and he was here to meet with Tazuna anyway. He followed the woman inside. Taking off his shinobi sandals, he padded barefoot along the wooden panels as Tsunami led him into a fully furnished living room. It really was a nice place. They even had multiple couches and a coffee table. "Please have a seat while I go fetch some tea and snacks." Oh, yeah. Okay." With nothing better to do, Naruto sat down on a comfortable couch with blue upholstery and looked around. A lot of pictures hung from the wall. Naruto recognized a few of them, including the picture with Keiza, Tsunami's deceased husband. However, there were also pictures of Team 7, several with Tazuna and his buddies, and a lot more with Inari. A little ways off was also a bookshelf, which had several books on architecture. "Sorry for the wait." Tsunami came out several moments later with a silver tray in her hands. She set the tray down, showing that it had a cup of tea, a kettle, and a plate of rice crackers. The dark-haired woman poured the hot tea into the cup, and set both the cup and plate in front of Naruto. "Here are your snacks and tea." "Thank you. You really didn't have to go through all this trouble." Naruto smiled as he took the cup in hand and sipped. It was hot, but his tongue was incapable of getting burned. "What are you talking about? It's not trouble at all." Tsunami's beaming smile was brighter than anything he'd seen from this woman. It looked as though life had treated her incredibly well after he and the rest of Team 7 had left. "Still, I'm surprised to see you. I had no idea you'd be visiting." Naruto hid his grimace behind a sardonic grin. "To be honest, I didn't either. Inari will be really happy to see you." Speaking of, where are Inari and old man Tazuna? "Oh, they're currently working." Now that she had given her guests something to munch on and drink, Tsunami sat down on the opposite couch, smoothed out her dark skirt, and began talking again. Ever since building the bridge, Tazuna has become involved in more than just bridge building. He currently owns and operates a company that specializes in architecture. Inari is training with him to one day take over the business. "Sounds like life has been treating your family well." "It has, and it's all thanks to you." Despite being quite the braggart, Naruto found his cheeks growing warm at the heartfelt words, spoken with complete sincerity. He coughed into his hand and asked Tsunami when Tazuna and Inari would get home. Unfortunately, she said they wouldn't be home for another hour or so. Since that was the case, Naruto spent the next hour chatting with the woman, asking about the sort of things she and her family had been up to. Seeing her smile as she told him all the stories of what had happened over the last 3 years made him feel proud. It was because of what Team 7 had done here that she and the people of this country could smile again. "We're home." A voice called from the entrance, old and worn. That was definitely Tazuna. "Hey, Mom. Guess what happened today? One of my designs was accept." A young man in his early teens rushed into the room, chatting excitedly, only to stop when he saw Naruto sitting on the couch. "Inari." Tsunami smiled. "Look who showed up." "Yo, Inari." Naruto raised a hand in greeting. "Looks like you're all grown up." "Hey. Good to see you're not so much of a brat anymore." Inari stared for several seconds, but then, inexplicably, he started to sniffle Ni. "Oh, boy. Ni-chan." If Naruto's danger senses hadn't gone off, he would have been unprepared for the flying glomp by the tearful boy. Grinning, he patted Inari on the head as Tazuna came into the room. "What's with all that shouting, Inari? Someone come." "Well, I'll be damned." Tazuna looked the same as ever. His beard and hair were completely gray, and he had several more wrinkles than before, but his body still looked sturdy. He had thick arms and legs, broad shoulders, and a gut stretching his white shirt. The glasses sitting on the bridge of his nose looked new. His clothing was nicer than Naruto remembered, but that was natural considering his position in the village now. "Sup, Tazuna." "Naruto Uzumaki." Tazuna grinned as he walked into the room and sat down. "It's been a long time. "What are you doing here? I wish I could say I dropped by for a visit, but I'm actually here on some pretty serious business," Naruto admitted, and thus he explained to the small family of 3 why he'd come to Nami no Kuni. He told them about the attack on Nadeshika no Sato, how several kunoichi had been kidnapped, and how they had discovered the slavers were using a mine that went through the mountain range to reach the high no Kuni and Nami. By the time he finished, the faces of Inari, Tazuna, and Tsunami had gone suitably pale. "You don't really think there's someone in the slave trading business here, do you?" Tazuna asked. "I mean, surely after what happened with Gato, no one would be stupid enough to try something like that. Actually, I believe it is specifically because of what happened with Gato that this person, whoever they are, decided to set up shop here." Naruto grabbed a rice cracker and bit into it. Rice crackers were fairly bland, but the light amount of salt from it complemented the green tea. Ever since Gato's demise, this land has been prosperous, and with a prosperous land comes numerous opportunities. It would be very easy for a person to hide their more sinister business practices behind a legitimate business, especially if the person in question is seen as someone trustworthy. His words sent a wave of shock and denial rippling through the trio. Inari looked like someone had punched him in the gut, while Tazuna's face had gone pale and stiff. Tsunami was hiding her mouth behind the tray she'd used to carry his tea and snacks. Finally, Tazuna ran a hand through his hair and sighed. "I don't know what to say. I mean, we've been doing so well here, and nothing bad has happened since the bridge was built. I can't think of anyone who would begin trafficking slaves through here. Except maybe. Do you have someone you know who might be responsible?" asked Naruto when Tazuna trailed off. "Not necessarily, but there is someone who managed to take control over Gato's old shipping business. Unlike Gato, this man was a strong supporter of the bridge and has helped our economy expand. While we trade with the mainland using the bridge, he uses this place as an outpost to trade with countries far away. Thanks to him, we've had business deals with countries like the former Yuki no Kuni, Mizu no Kuni, Sora no Kuni, Tori, Oni. The man ticked off a large number of countries located on the smaller continent located across the Kaizoku Sea. It really did sound like this man was doing a great job at bringing prosperity to this village. At the same time, that made Naruto even more suspicious. Call him a cynic, but he didn't trust this businessman. "Who is this man?" asked Naruto. Tazuna hesitated for a moment, but then, with seemingly great reluctance, he answered. "His name is Kato, and he's the owner of the newly renamed Nami Shipping Corporation." Zox Nami Shipping Corporation was the renamed Gato Shipping Corporation. After Gato's death, the company had been in disarray, with the numerous underlings who worked in various departments across the elemental nations fighting to control the company. Thanks to that, quite a few of the company's larger operations had broken down entirely and were no longer operating. According to Tazuna, Kato was one of the few people who'd managed to reclaim a piece of Gato's original shipping company. He'd arrived on Nami no Kuni and negotiated shipping rights with the people of this island nation. They'd been distrustful at first, but Kato had told them he would allow them to create a contract themselves so he couldn't swindle them. Since then, Kato had turned a once-defunct company into a massive shipping corporation that sold goods all across the Kaizoku Sea using Nami no Kuni as his corporate headquarters. Even with the bridge, Nami no Kuni was still situated along the numerous trade routes that many trading vessels used. Kato had used this to his advantage. Not only had he remade the company, now newly named, great again, but he did so in such a way that the people of Nami no Kuni also prospered. It was genius. And that was why Naruto didn't trust him. Nami Shipping Corporation was located on the docks, a massive dock made of cement and brick instead of wood. A large number of ships were currently docked in several stations. There was everything from large cargo freighters to smaller passenger ships. Quite a few giant cargo crates were stacked against each other a little ways off. A massive crane was picking them up and setting them onto a ship that would no doubt set sail soon. Naruto had come to this place without disguising himself. He'd thought about sneaking around, but he actually believed the best method of getting the information he needed was to be upfront and honest. It would throw Kato off guard. The headquarters building loomed before him, a 4-story complex that was longer than it was wide, stretching across the dock like a massive snake. Made of cement, the industrious feel of the building made Naruto somewhat unnerved. He was so used to buildings being made in a more traditional style of architecture. He entered the building, which bustled with activity. Wandering past a pair of dock workers, he strolled across the tiled floor of what seemed like a lobby, though it was far too big for that in his mind. What did they need all this space for? Like most business, this place had a front desk, which could be used for inquiries. The woman behind the desk was a pretty gal with brown hair, dark skin, and a bright smile. As Naruto stepped up to her, she greeted him with a friendly and cheerful demeanor. "Hello, good sir? How may I help you today? Is it possible to speak with Kato at all? Do you have an appointment?" "I'm afraid not." The woman's smile became slightly fixed. "I apologize, but Kato is an incredibly busy man, so unless you have an appointment, I'm not sure if he'll have the time to see you. In fact, I believe he's currently doing an inspection of our docking facilities, which often takes hours, so even he was inclined to meet, he wouldn't be able to do so right now." Naruto could tell this woman wasn't lying. More than likely, this woman worked for the legitimate side of this company and knew nothing about what was going on behind the scenes. Well, that was if Naruto turned out to be correct about what Kato was really up to. "That so? Is it possible for you to get in touch with him?" "Well, we do have a method of getting in touch with him, yes." "Then could you please tell him that Naruto Uzumaki would like to speak with him sometime soon?" The woman was definitely not a native of Nami. Naruto would have known if she was, but her eyes widened all the same upon hearing his name. No doubt she knew the story of what happened in this country. It was apparently quite famous. Many of the people who lived in this country when he was a Jonin told stories about how Naruto and his team had saved this country from the corrupt Gato. Of course. I shall do so right away. Please wait for one moment." "Sure thing." Naruto stood around as the woman scurried toward a small comm unit. It wasn't like one of the earpiece comm units worn by Team 7 when they were doing missions in the village. It was bigger, bulkier, but it apparently allowed short-distance communication like the earpieces they used to wear. He could have listened in, but there was no need. The woman came back to him seconds later. "He said he'll be right down." "Sounds good. Thank you." "Oh, of course." The woman blushed as she fiddled with the hem of her skirt. "And, can I just say that it's an honor to meet you, sir." "Sir?" Naruto almost grimaced, but he contained it with a smile as he scratched his cheek. "Aww. Thanks." The woman was apparently a big fan of his. Her uncle had lived in Nami when Naruto was guarding Tazna. According to her, he was one of the bridge workers that Naruto had saved, and he'd been able to witness a good portion of the fight. Her uncle told her the story of how Naruto and his companions had defeated the evil Gato so many times that she'd become enamored with his story. It was actually kind of embarrassing. About 15 minutes later, a tall, handsome man with articulate and almost delicate features walked into the lobby. His immaculate face spoke of someone with good breeding. Naruto would have mistaken him for a noble at first glance, but this man wore a business suit, something that a noble wouldn't be caught dead in. He had dark hair and dark eyes, and the polite smile he wore was deceptively sincere. "You must be Naruto Uzumaki." The man extended his hand. "I'm Kato. It's a great honor to meet you." "Likewise." Naruto took the man's hand in a firm shake. Kato didn't seem to notice the chakra emitting from Naruto's palm. "I've heard a lot about you from Tazna." "Ah, yes. The bridge builder. He's making quite a name for himself." Kato kept a smile on his face, though he quickly moved this along. "I would honestly love to sit down and talk with you, but I actually am really busy. I'm assuming you're here for a reason?" "I am." Naruto remained polite as he explained the situation. "Several kunoichi from Nadeshika no Sato have been kidnapped. We managed to track them to Nami no Kuni, but we have no idea where they might be. As the head of a large company, I'm sure you hear a lot of things that most people don't. I was hoping you might have heard something." "Kidnapped kunoichi? That sounds like a lot of trouble, though I can't say I've heard anything about it." "Are you sure the kidnappers are here?" Naruto nodded. "Yes. They used a mine that went from Udon no Kuni to Hai no Kuni. The location is close to the Great Naruto Bridge, and since traveling via caravan is more likely to be noticed than traveling by sea. You believe there might be someone using the docking stations for the purpose of trading slaves?" "Yes." A troubled expression crossed Kato's face. It looked so genuine that Naruto really did have to wonder if this man might truly be innocent. He seemed guileless. If he was innocent, then it meant Naruto was not only barking up the wrong tree, but that he was accusing an innocent man. On the other hand, the cynic inside of Naruto was telling him this man knew something. "I haven't heard of anyone trading slaves here, but I will admit that it's a large dock, and we have had problems with scrupulous individuals in the past." Kato sighed as an expression of remorse mixed with determination caused his face to both harden and age. He looked like a man carrying the world on his back. "I don't know what I can do, but I promise to look into this and inform you of anything I find out. Would Tazana's house be a good place to reach you?" "Yes, that would be fine," Naruto said. "Okay. I'll be sure to let you know if I uncover anything." "Thank you." After giving Kato one last handshake and secretly placing a tracking seal on the businessman, Naruto left the docks. That's it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and follow me on my other social media accounts. Anime God here, and I'm signing off.